Hey guys, you are watching your anime world. How are you all? Please support to subscribe this channel for watching new interesting stories. So in this video, we will see what if Deku helped Pony become a better hero. Here is short summary. During an ordinary day at the library, Izuku has an unexpected encounter with an energetic young girl he'd come to know as Pony. Izuku offers to help after he had caused an accident he felt guilty about. In response, she asks him to help her study to become a better hero. He accepts naturally, but could there be more to it than Pony Tsunotori is letting on about? But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if possible, share this video with your friends. Now let's start the story. After having finished class an hour ago, Midoriya was now visiting the library to pick up some study material. I've been so hung up on my hero training that I have let my knowledge on all the pro heroes and their quirks get a little bit rusty. He thought to himself as he found it harder to recall what was once common knowledge. The boy stopped in front of a bookshelf and reached up to grab a few books. Let's see, I'll take this one, and this one, oh, and that one will do as well. He muttered to himself while grabbing the most fitting books to reinforce his knowledge. Now outfitted with a needlessly tall stack of books about heroes that completely obstructed his field of vision, Izuku proceeded to make his way to the checkout desk. This is exciting. I can't wait to learn more about OWW. As he was thinking to himself, the boy ran into something, causing him to fall to the ground, dropping all of his books in the process. "Aw-tee, that really hurt," an unfamiliar voice muttered in pain. Midoriya's eyes widened in surprise as he processed what happened. He quickly jumped to his feet, racked with guilt and nervousness as he looked down to see a young blonde girl around his age. "Oh my god, I'm so sorry, I didn't see where I was going." He spoke a mile a minute as he quickly helped the girl to her feet. The girl tilted her head in confusion, mouth slightly agape, as she looked at the boy who in a fit of nervousness scrambled to the ground to pick up her books. As fast as he could, Izuku gathered the books he had so rudely caused to topple over and put them on the nearest table before returning to face the girl and repeatedly bowing while apologizing frantically. "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry," he continued on. The girl's confusion turned to a warm yet small smile as she quickly grabbed the boy's hand. "Hey, it's okay, I'm not mad, I know it was just an accident." She spoke softly and soothingly as she calmed the boy down. Midoriya looked at the girl, fear-stricken and heart-racing, as he gulped. Why you sure? Please, is there anything I can do to make it up to you?" He insisted on trying to help. The blonde girl looked at him intently for a second before a jolt of realization hit her. "I know you. You're Izuku Midoriya," she spoke aloud in triumphant excitement. Midoriya finally went silent as he adopted the same confused expression she held not too long ago. "You know who I am?" he asked quietly. "My name is Pony Tsunotori. I go to UA just like you do. Your performance in the sports festival was rather unique," she answered diligently. Izuku let out of a breath of relief and looked at the girl. "So that's how you know me. Makes sense," he said in a calmer state now. "Say, I hear you're pretty smart. You mentioned wanting to make it up to me. Well, I could use some help studying if you don't mind," she asked while leaning in closer. Izuku nervously averted his gaze ever so slightly as the girl violated his comfort zone with a persistent air to her. Sure, I guess I wouldn't mind helping out with that," he hesitantly answered. "Wonderful, let's go," she said while grabbing his arm and pulling him away. Midoriya turned back with a heartbroken expression. "My books." He reached out for the salvation of knowledge, but to no avail as Pony yanked him away from the library. Later on they had returned to campus, Pony still yanking his arm all the way along. Izuku looked at his dorm building which they passed along and then took notice of the building they were approaching. It looked just like the one he lived in alongside his friends, but instead held a B for representation instead of an A like his own. So she's one of the students in Class B, he wondered to himself. That question was answered by Pony opening the door and failing to relent in pulling him in. "Before we get to that boring old studying, how about you join my class for dinner?" Pony asked rhetorically as she pulled the confused boy to the common area. Sure enough, many of Class 1B were there and immediately turned their attention to Pony and Midoriya. Oh Pony, you brought a friend. Kanoko spoke while she and several other students went to circle the two. Yeah, this is Midoriya from Class 1A. He's agreed to help me study after we all have dinner. Pony excitedly proclaimed. That is most wonderful to hear. Midoriya, please make yourself at home, I'll set another plate for you. Kendo further added while approaching the boy and gesturing for him to sit with everyone. Midoriya did just that while Pony took the seat next to him. We'll look who's come crawling into Class 1B's dorm rooms. What's the matter, friend? Your own very own Class 1A can't cook as well as us here in the lesser class, huh? An arrogant and condescending while also familiar voice came into earshot as Izuku turned his attention to it. Oh hey Monoma, no it's not that, just came here to help Pony I guess. Midoriya said casually. Monoma looked annoyed and disappointed as his attention turned to Pony. Pony, why are you seeking help from this Class A dipshit? I told you I would help you with anything you need. He said casually with an underlying bitterness in his voice. Pony looked at him with a blank expression and shrugged, not having much of an answer. He's smart. I need smart to help with studying. Come on now Monoma, you know it's common knowledge that Class A is generally considered superior to us. Narengeki interjected. Monoma looked at his teammate with a defiant expression. Who decided that? I mean, we had all of our members pass the provisional license exams and they didn't. He said defiantly. Only 2 of them failed. It is still beyond impressive, especially considering the low success rate for such an event, and they have more field experience fighting villains. All I'm saying is I actually think it's a wonderful idea for us to learn from them instead of indulging in your petty never-ending dick measuring competition. Narengeki responded. Are you kidding me? Monoma turned to look at Midoriya again. The green-haired boy looked at him for a second before standing up with a gentle smile on his face. I think your friend makes a wonderful point. Moreover, it's no small feat that your class met the provisional license exams with complete success. Furthermore, due to all of the villain attacks we've had to survive, we haven't actually gotten to hit the books on the conventional hero studies quite as much as you guys. I think Class 1A could learn just as much from your class. Midoriya said, extending a hand as an offer of friendship. Monoma looked at Midoriya's hand with disgust as a bead of sweat dropped from his forehead. He prepared to swat his hand away, but then thought about what everyone said and let go of his hostile intent, all while still refusing to shake Midoriya's hand. All this rubbish talk is making me sick. That being said, I am glad you can see our class's potential. I'm leaving. Enjoy your dinner date with the A-boy here. Monoma said dismissively as he walked away. Narengeki looked shocked for a brief moment but turned back to Midoriya with an apologetic smile. I'm impressed. Monoma seldom ever has anything remotely neutral, let alone positive, to say about your class. You appealed to his ego and tenderly massaged the aching pain that festers within the seams of his inferiority complex, but all the same I'm still really sorry about him. I know our classes have their playful feuds, but Monoma just never knows when to shut it off. Oh, it's nothing to worry about. The truth is that I actually really admire his tireless ambition and tactical thinking. Midoriya said reassuringly. Narengeki looked at Midoriya with a bewildered expression before said expression turned into an amused chuckle. You're a strange guy. Most people from your class would and do hold disdain for Monoma's uncalled for treatment, but you don't care. You can actually find the positive aspects about him. Few people hold such patience and forgiveness for such an insufferable kind of person, but you know. I think I like that about you. Narengeki explained with a slightly less formal tone. Before the conversation could continue, the students working on dinner came out with a cart full of prepared food. Hey, come now. Who wants to waste breath on Monoma when we've got all this delicious dinner to eat instead? Kendo said happily as she brought food out for everyone with the assistance of some of her classmates. Everyone's eyes lit up with excitement as they raced over to grab their plate. Midoriya, being a polite and reserved gentleman at heart, stayed back, not sure what would qualify as overstepping boundaries at that point in time. Pony came back soon enough with 2 plates in hand and happily passed one to Midoriya. Thank you very much, Pony. Honestly, I hardly expected to be fed by Class 1B tonight. He said with a sheepish chuckle. Pony looked at the boy with a sly grin. Honestly, did you think I would neglect to feed you after having asked you to come here and help me tonight? My grandparents would turn over in their graves if I did that. She brushed off the gratitude as paying it forward seemed like common sense to the girl. Midoriya looked touched by the statement and fighting a tear of happiness trying to roll down his cheek turned in a desperate attempt to escape from Pony's wholesome vibes and began to eat. Later on everyone had finished dinner and some of Class 1B had stayed to help clean up. At this point Midoriya was following Pony back to her room. The girl opened the door and he stopped there to see her room. It was fairly normal, reminiscent of someone like Ochako or Ojiro's room, but had wooden floor covered in soft fluffy rugs and a fairly sized table against the wall. It was clear from the table lamp and the dozens of books nearby that that was where Pony was conducting her studying. "Make yourself comfortable, I'm gonna fetch the lesson plan," Pony said nonchalantly as she walked to her closet. Midoriya nodded and went to the table where he sat down and took a look at the books just laying out. Guide on Japanese pronunciation. I think I heard something about Pony being an exchange student from America, so that tracks. He thought to himself before turning to another book. Advanced Team Tactics Long Distance Quirk Edition. So she wants to be able to better coordinate attacks with her classmates. Okay, that also sounds sensible. He further looked into what he'd help her with as his attention further deviated to yet another book. The Ultimate Guide to Being a Good Husband-Wife. Okay, that sounds norm. His thoughts froze midway in confusion. Pony. I understand needing most of these books, but why, the one on marriage life? He asked, confused. Pony was standing by the closet on the other side of the room and looked back at him. Oh, that's just an additional one that my mom sent me and suggested I read for when I'm ready to settle down. Let's just say she's not been the most supportive of my wish to become a pro hero, Pony answered as her tone turned distant and sad near the end. Oh, okay, I guess it's not important for studying then. The boy asked, turning around to look at her only for his face to turn beet red at what he saw. Yeah, I've got my sights set on becoming one of the best heroes and tacticians there is. I don't have time for trivial things like relationships. She spoke with confidence as she unbuttoned her school uniform top and pulled it off before tossing it on her bed. Left speechless by the sight, Izuku turned away with the sight of her half-naked body burned into his mind. Pony seemed oblivious though as she continued to grab a stick of deodorant and apply it to her armpits before grabbing a more casual pink t-shirt and putting it on. But yeah, anyways, let's take a look at the what I have for priorities, she said casually as she walked over and took a seat next to Midoriya. As she did that, she laid down a small chart that had Pony's goals written at the top in bright multicolored font. Here's what I want to work on for my hero studies. I want to strengthen the durability of my horns to penetrate even tougher substances. As far as academics go, I need to improve on my language and social skills, Pony explained while Midoriya listened intently while placing his hand over his mouth in intense thought about how to help her. The two got to work on what promised a long and strenuous night of studying. The next day had come and Midoriya cracked an eye open, light shine through causing a feeling of morning deliriousness, but something bigger was amiss, bringing him to full attention. Holy crap, this isn't my room. He shot up and frantically turned his head left and right. Oh wait, it's Pony room. I was helping her study, guess I passed out, the boy speculated. As he was thinking, the door was suddenly opened and he turned around to see Pony standing there. Morning, sleepy head. I brought you some breakfast as a way of thanking you for your help, Pony said cheerfully as she handed him a plate of fried eggs with a side of mashed potatoes. Oh wow, this looks delicious, Pony. Thank you. He couldn't help but excitedly display his gratitude. After feeling his stumble grumble, Midoriya took the hint that it was time to eat. You're very welcome. I really hate to rush you though, but please eat quickly because classes start in 45 minutes. Pony advised him. Midoriya came to a stunned halt after hearing that and pulled out his phone to check the time. Damn, I would have liked to get up a little earlier. I'll have to eat fast and get back to my room to get ready. Also, why are there so many messages from Iida? The boy thought in distress but pushed the second question thought aside as he quickly ate. Pony turned her attention away from the boy and went to get her bag ready for school. A few minutes later and Midoriya had finished breakfast and was about to rush out the door. Wait a second, he stopped in an instant and turned to Pony. So I know this sounds strange, but could you go out the window? Nobody knows you're still here, and if they saw a boy leaving my room this early in the morning, well, let's just say I wouldn't be able to live down such depraved rumors. Pony explained rather shyly as she nervously started to twirl a strand of hair around her index finger with a blush across her face. It took Midoriya a moment to process her words, but he quickly got the idea and in turn also turned red from the embarrassment of the idea. I see. Yeah, that would be rather awkward. And no need to tell me twice. The green-haired boy ran to the window and was about to leave. Hey Midoriya. He turned around to see Pony standing up looking like she still had more to say. Thanks for helping me study. I already feel like your tutelage has been invaluable. So, if it's okay with you, can we do it again tonight, same time and all that? The girl was redder than ever before as she seemed hesitant to ask. Of course Pony, I'll stop by again later, Midoriya said with a kind smile as he gave her a thumbs up before finally hopping out the window and traversing campus in order to get back to the 1A dormitory. The blonde girl walked over to the window and watched Midoriya speed off as fast as he could. She then turned her head to the corner of her room where she looked at a pair of underwear with a blank stare. Soon enough the boy had gotten back home and raced to his room to grab a clean change of clothes before going to the bathroom to take a shower. Afterwards he dried off, changed into his new clothes and then brushing his teeth before finally checking his phone again. Class starts in 15 minutes, okay, making good time, he thought to himself as he left the bathroom and proceeded to the kitchen. Upon arrival the boy was met with the familiar faces of two of his classmates Iida and Zero. Ah, there you are Midoriya, I've been looking all over for you. Iida said relieved. Oh, is everything okay Iida? Midoriya asked concerned. Well, I just went through the halls to make sure everyone who I hadn't seen this morning was awake and getting ready. I hadn't seen you at all last night and I couldn't find you, which was rather unusual given how you're always on top of your hero studies. Iida explained. Midoriya averted his gaze with a look of shame and guilt as he thought of how to explain to his friends about why he hadn't been home, but hoped the subject wouldn't be brought up as avoiding such a topic would be most ideal. I'm glad you were concerned about me, but as you can see I'm okay. Nothing to worry about, he finally said. Iida adjusted his glasses and looked at the green-haired boy with a serious expression. Be that as it may, where were you last night? I texted several times but you didn't answer. I inquired about your safety from the others and Suyu said you were fine as you texted her recently, so I didn't go out looking, but still, why didn't you tell everyone that you would be away for so long? Tenya inquired. Well, I was at Class 1B's helping one of their students study. I kinda fell asleep there, so I never made it back here last night. Midoriya hesitantly said. This caught the interest of both Iida and Zero as they looked at him with curiosity. Who were you helping? Ooh, was it a cute girl? Zero inquired with a grin. Midoriya once again looked away in embarrassment but quickly composed himself as best he could. Well, it was a girl. Pony Tsunotori, he reluctantly confessed. Wait, what? Midoriya covered his ears as he heard a loud shout from behind him and turned to see Kaminari. You spent the night with a girl at Class B's dorm. He shouted aloud in disbelief. Calm down man, he never said he slept in her room. Zero said, trying to reel the conversation back in. You didn't, right? Kaminari asked as he struggled to keep his possibly unwarranted jealousy in check. At this point Midoriya had once again turned beet red as his friends had given him an entirely new and embarrassing way of looking at something that in retrospect probably wasn't as normal as he originally perceived. Well, I mean, technically. I did, he stuttered nervously as he felt his heart pounding. Kaminari and Zero's jaws dropped in shock while Tenya remained silent and turned away to make some breakfast, seemingly focused on something else. Midoriya stood there awkwardly as he struggled to find the confidence to explain what happened. Come on, just spit it out. The boy made a conscious effort to steel his resolve and punched himself in the face, which only served to confuse the two other boys. Look, it wasn't like that. I fell asleep on the floor is all. I've known the girl for less than a day. I mean, come on, he said a little more aggressively than he would have liked as he explained his case. Shiro and Kaminari looked at him intensely as if trying to stare into his soul, which seemed to rid Midoriya of the confidence he'd briefly mustered as he looked uncomfortable again and shrunk down under the pressure of their suspicions. Please don't tell Mineta," the boy quickly muttered. Shiro continued to stare intently before his expression finally softened. "I believe you. I mean, if anything really did happen, I bet you'd be a gibberish mess all week," he said while holding a laugh in. "I guess Shiro's right. Sorry I got a bit heated just now, but still totally wish it was me though," Kaminari added. Midoriya breathed a sigh of relief after seeing his friends calm down. "I'm glad you guys understand it wasn't anything weird. On another note, you got your bags packed for class, right?" he asked cautiously. A few seconds passed by as realization hit them both. "Oh crap," they frantically said in unison as they raced out of the kitchen. Midoriya stared at the wall as another thought popped into his head. Why didn't Pony at least put me on the couch or something anyways? It wouldn't have looked too strange if I was just sleeping there. The room went silent as they left, and Midoriya turned around to look at Iida, who had his back turned and was just slicing onions in cold silence. "Hey, Iida, you okay right now?" he nervously gulped as his friend had been unusually quiet after berating him earlier. Iida didn't respond as he continued to chop onions in silence, causing Midoriya's ear to sink in further despair and confusion as he looked at his friend with concern. "I realize I may be a little overbearing sometimes. But you left without communicating that to anyone. You could have at least said you wouldn't be home last night so that we'd know nothing bad happened." The taller boy suddenly spoke, scolding Midoriya. Midoriya was uncertain now and looked closer to notice Iida's hand shaking ever so slightly. Was he really that worried? Damn it, how could I be so inconsiderate? Midoriya hung his head down in frustration as he clenched his fist angrily. After lamenting his own failures, the boy looked back at Iida and silently stared at him for a moment, trying to pick his words carefully, knowing how serious the class representative could be. "I'm really sorry, Iida. I only texted Suyu in response because she asked me if I wanted to hang out earlier, but obviously I couldn't, and I just got so caught up in studying with Pony that I hadn't even checked my phone at all last night," he tried to explain calmly. At this point Iida put the knife down and turned around with a disgruntled expression. "Villain activity is on the rise. If that weren't the case, then we wouldn't need to worry about things like this. I'm just concerned for everyone's well-being is all. Please just be a little more communicative from now on whenever you're going out by yourself," the taller boy solemnly explained. Midoriya took a few steps closer and put a hand on his shoulder, all while still being concerned. "I'll still be helping Pony study for a while. However, I promise to let you know if I won't be home. Again, I'm really sorry for making you worry, Iida." Midoriya apologized as he couldn't stand to see anyone so frustrated. "Thank you. That's all I ask." Iida smiled in relief as his troubles seemed to fade. Before any more words could be exchanged, an alarm went off, interrupting the two. "Class starts in 5 minutes. I should have been there 10 minutes ago." Iida promptly ran past the green-haired boy in a frantic hurry, causing Midoriya to chuckle. Now there's the Iida I'm used to, but he's right. I gotta get going too. Midoriya quickly grabbed his bag and raced to class as well. A few hours had passed since her tutor had left for school, and Pony followed a similar routine throughout the day. She was just now getting out of the line for students to grab lunch and looked over at the section of the cafeteria where Class 1B generally tends to claim for their own spot. With a gleeful smile, she went to join her friends. "Hey Pony, there you are. We were just talking about you." Her ears perked up in curiosity as she heard Kanoko speak those words. The young girl was not used to being the center of attention. "Oh, and what about?" she asked as she sat with the other girls from her class. "You and Midoriya were studying together." "Just a boy and a girl all alone together uninterrupted." Setsuna spoke with a provocative and teasing smirk. Pony's eyes narrowed in suspicion as she leaned forward. "What exactly are you getting at?" Setsuna couldn't help but chuckle in amusement at the horn user's bluntness. "Everyone's just dying to know. Did anything happen between you guys?" Kanoko added with a carefree grin. "You were all alone together. Is Midoriya really spooky when bathed in the shadows?" Reiko followed up with her own question. Just as quickly as they spat out their questions, everyone went silent as Pony quickly turned red in embarrassment while shaking furiously. Stop it, you guys. Nothing happened, you hear me? Nothing. Is it really so wrong that I asked someone who's really smart to give me a hand with my studies? Why should it matter if he's a boy or not? She angrily shouted while she repeatedly slammed her fists against the table. Whoa, take it easy, Pony, Setsuna said hastily while grabbing Pony's hands to stop her. Pony looked closely at her friend, still seething with frustration from their teasing. I'm sorry we got you all hot and bothered over something so dumb. We were curious, but it's clear that it's a sensitive subject and likely nothing happened. Now can you please calm down before everyone starts staring? Setsuna whispered while slightly panicked by her friend's outburst, as she didn't want to make a scene. The blonde girl's glare softened and she soon calmed down while taking a deep breath. The girls all looked worried for their friend after seeing her so riled up. Sorry about that, girls. But yeah, like I told you, nothing happened. I just want Midoriya's help so I can be a greater hero. Whenever Monoma helps me, he just tricks me into saying something mean or weird, and Kendo is always too busy to do it. Pony explained to her friends in a calmer manner. The mood had returned to normal now, as everyone had felt relieved to see Pony relax. So I take it that you're going to continue studying with him for the long run then? Kanoko asked. Yeah, if I can get him to. Don't get me wrong, he's a really sweet boy and all that, but there's not a cotton ball's chance in the furnace that I would ever get together with him in a romantic way. The blonde answered. Setsuna rubbed the back of her head with an embarrassed look before turning back to her friend with a kind smile. In that case, we promise not to make a big deal whenever he comes over. He'll just be another guy around the house. The lizard heroine said with a wink while gaining a nod of agreement from the other girls at the table. Seemingly overwhelmed by her friend's support, Pony buried her face in her hands. Everyone returned to their concerned state of mind as it broke their hearts to see their good friend so distraught. What did we do wrong? Kanoko spoke in confusion. I am. Jay just so happy to have such amazing friends. Pony suddenly cried out with tears streaming down her face. Setsuna couldn't help but smile in adoration as she leaned in closer and brought the young girl into a hug, while Kanoko and Reiko stood up and joined her in doing so. You guys are the best. Pony softly muttered to herself. Over across from them at another table, a group of students were staring at them in confusion. Man, that was dramatic, Hiroshima said, rather bewildered, a sentiment nobody around him seemed to disagree with. Later on, school had ended yet again and Midoriya had just returned to the dorm where he went to his room. Today was intense. Mr. Aizawa really didn't let up one bit with training exercises. The green-haired boy thought to himself as he tossed his bag down and took a look around. He soon went over to his dresser and pulled out some more casual clothes before starting to remove his uniform and putting on some black sweatpants and a white t-shirt. After tossing his dirty clothes in a basket, he grabbed his socks and shoes and put them on as well. All right, time to go see Pony, the green-haired boy said quietly to himself while closing his door and making his way to Class B's dormitory. Elsewhere, Pony was giving her room a good look around to make sure everything was in order for Midoriya's second visit. So I've got snacks in case we get hungry, made sure to clean up a little so the place is more presentable, and everything I want to study is all planned out. Pony thought to herself. The blonde girl soon raised her arms up high, clasped her fingers together as she stretched for a good few seconds before plopping down into bed and looking up at the ceiling. Now I'm just missing that cutie pie of a teacher of mine and everything will be all set. Pony closed her eyes with a content smile and allowed herself to rest in an effort to pass the time. Midoriya had finally arrived at the other dorm and knocked on the door. A girl of average height with dark green hair answered the door and looked right at him while leaning against the entrance. Hi, is Pony home right now? He awkwardly asked. The girl continued to stare at him, but her eyes narrowed as she shot him an annoyed glare. Geez, you ever heard of manners? You're supposed to introduce yourself when you come over to a stranger's home. Your mother ought to be ashamed of the pig she raised. Midoriya coiled back in shock as a look of pure horror and regret crossed his face. Oh my god, you're right. I'm so sore. The boy started to go on but was quickly interrupted as the girl leaning against the door forced him into a headlock and ruffled his hair. "Relax, I'm just messing with you, dude. The name's Setsuna. I'm one of the lovely ladies you'll find in Class B." The girl spoke playfully and carefree. Midoriya remained stiff and shocked as Setsuna's embrace was rough and rather abrupt. "And you, of course, are Midoriya. Honestly can't believe you bought into that. I mean, you had dinner with us just last night. Why would anyone need you to introduce yourself?" The girl callously teased him for his gullibility. "Why, you're right. Please forgive me," he mumbled submissively as he felt his presence shrink in the face of his newfound tormentor. Setsuna finally let go of Midoriya and looked at him with a cocky smirk. "Are you really the same kid from the sports festival? Damn, you're more of a basket case than I ever could have expected. But enough of that though, let me take you to Pony," she said while walking back into the house and gesturing for him to follow. Midoriya hesitated for a second before deciding to comply as he allowed her to escort him to his destination. While the two walked through the house, many other students glanced at Midoriya for a small moment before returning to their various activities. It didn't take long before Setsuna finally stopped in front of a door which he could only assume leads to Pony's room. The boy stepped up to the door and was about to knock. His knuckles came within centimeters of the door before he felt Setsuna grab his wrist. He nervously looked over in her direction and was met with a serious glare similar to the one she introduced herself with earlier. "Before you go on in there, I want to make one crystal clear to you." Midoriya gulped as he continued to look at her, waiting to hear what she had to say. "I don't know what you will become to her on a personal level. It doesn't matter. Just know that you better treat her right, or else." Setsuna spoke with deadly seriousness. Once again he'd felt the life leave his body as he faced the girl's intensity and could only manage to weakly nod in understanding. "Glad we've got that cleared up. You kids have fun in there." She'd quickly reverted back to her joyful and carefree self while viscously slapping Midoriya on the back before she walked away. Midoriya watched her leave with no shortage of confidence. What an absolutely terrifying person. "I guess Pony's lucky to have such committed friends though," he thought to himself before turning his attention back to the door and knocking. A few seconds later Pony answered and her face lit up with happiness upon seeing him. "Izuku, come on in. Make yourself at home and let's get studying." Pony graciously stepped to the side and welcomed him. The boy gladly accepted with a smile and stepped into her room. While he did that, Pony sat down at the table where they were studying last night. Midoriya took a seat next to her and looked at all the books they had yet to thoroughly comb over. "So today I want to focus on environmental factors and gain a better understanding of where my quirk is most advantageous and where it's severely hindered," the blonde explained. "Of course, how about we start off by looking at enclosed areas? Based on what I know of your quirk, that seems like a considerable weakness," Midoriya offered in response. "Yes, that sounds like a great start," Pony joyfully responded while grabbing a book from the farthest stack. A couple hours later Midoriya and Pony were taking a break from studying after having devised several strategies and taken countless variables into consideration. Midoriya continued to sit at the table though, still looking at books so he could better help Pony. The horn user lay on the bed with a small bottle of juice in hand. She took a drink before setting it down on the table stand next to her. Her eyes fell upon Midoriya with a curious thought in mind. "You're supposed to be taking a break, why are you still looking at the books?" she suddenly asked. "I have to think of every possibility when it comes to helping you improve. Please don't worry about me. You go ahead and relax," the green-haired boy quickly insisted. Pony sat up from her bed as her curiosity grew from his response. "You really are a driven and determined guy, aren't you?" she asked. "You give me too much credit. I'm just another UA student aiming to be a hero." Midoriya humbly disagreed. Pony's eyes narrowed in response to this. All focus on anything else had completely disappeared. "You're wrong. I've seen that look before. Infallible and uncompromising resolve. When you fought Todoroki." This caught the boy's attention as he closed the book and turned around to face the blonde. That was different. His tone had gone from casual and sweet to completely serious. "How so?" Pony's eyes softened as she wondered what had changed in him so suddenly. We were all aiming for victory that day. But Todoroki, I saw something more important when we fought. The boy glanced down with a troubled look. Neither of the two students said a word, while Pony kept looking at him wondering just what was on his mind. The most important thing a hero could ever do is save someone in their time of need. If I turn my back on someone struggling, and allow them to drown in fear, despair, and hatred that could have been avoided, how could I ever forgive myself? Is that why you're helping me study? Because you can't stand the thought of me failing and suffering from frustration and sadness? Pony asked in wonder. Midoriya nodded yes in response. I know it's a strange and an unrealistically extreme comparison, saving a life and helping someone study, but if I am going to help with the big things, then I gotta be able to help with the little things too. The boy said. Pony stood up from her bed and slowly approached Midoriya. She sat down and wrapped her arms around one of his own while leaning closer to his ear. Careful now, that's a dangerous mentality. A conniving little vixen might just come and take advantage of your sweet little heart. She mischievously whispered into his ear. Pony, what are you trying to say? He fell back stuttering with a blush across his face. The blonde put a hand over her mouth to suppress her laughter. I'm just joking with you. No need to be so serious. Pony teased. Midoriya needed a few seconds to calm down before he dryly chuckled along with her, though in truth it was forced and he didn't necessarily find it amusing but rather wanted to keep the mood light. He then came closer and took a seat next to Pony once more. Let's get back to studying now, he said as he reached out to grab a book. As he tried to do that, Pony reached out and grabbed the book, stopping him from the task he'd set out to achieve. Oh no, you don't. I just found your worst characteristic yet, and I have to say, I'm not a fan of it. Midoriya looked at her confused and was about to ask what she meant. You're just a tad bit too selfless and independent for your own good. Great qualities for a hero, sure, but you're taking it too far. I won't have you burning yourself out just for me. Pony didn't leave him hanging on an answer as she strictly reprimanded him with a stern expression. I won't abandon the people that need me, Pony. How could say such a... He began to get frustrated, but Pony placed a finger in front of his lips, cutting him off. Look at you, you're exhausted. I'm not asking or expecting you to change your beliefs. I'm not asking you to stop putting other people before yourself when the time comes and a villain attacks. I'm damn sure telling you to put the books down and come have dinner with me in the class. The girl's firm tone remained consistent while she stood up. Midoriya was too confused at this point to be able to process her words all at once and turned to look at her. Pony was standing at the door and turned around with an expectant and impatient look on her face. Well, what are you waiting for? Come on, slowpoke. Okay. The boy got up slowly and followed her outside to the living room. Later that night, the two of them stood outside of the dormitory entrance. They'd eaten dinner and got a couple more hours worth of studying done. Listen, Pony, I've thought about what you said and I'm afraid I just can't do it. When someone is in trouble, I'm going to be there to save them, even if it means sacrificing a part of myself. Midoriya sadly explained. Pony looked at him, annoyed yet again at hearing this. She raised her hand and viscously slapped him across the face. Ow, the green-haired whined. Enough of this sacrificing talk, Izuku. As heroes, yes, sometimes sacrifices need to be made, but they should not be a first resort. You have friends and allies all around the city. Don't you get it, you idiot? You're not alone in this world. Now teary-eyed and upset, the blonde vented her frustrations. Midoriya stared at her in confusion, still conflicted as she challenged his way of thinking at every corner. Pony, I don't know what to say, he lowly muttered out. The blonde sighed before grabbing his hand, causing him to look back at her. So don't say anything then. Just please remember that you have friends. All of them with the same conviction and determination as you. Just stop pushing yourself so hard and take a backseat every now and then so others can lighten the load for you. Pony said to him. Midoriya's conflicted expression softened somewhat as he looked into her pleading eyes. You make a good point, I guess. Maybe I should slow down, just for a bit at least. He reluctantly agreed, although the idea of not doing all he can to help others was deeply unsettling to the boy. Hearing him say that surprised the blonde, as she felt she'd had a pretty good inclination of how stubborn he could be, thus causing her to expect an uphill battle on the subject. although she couldn't help but smile after hearing that. And I know the perfect way to do just that. Pony enthusiastically replied, seemingly back to her happier self. The boy looked at her with a curious expression, wondering what she had in mind. No school tomorrow, so let's go to the mall and just hang out for the day. Doesn't that sound like fun? She cheerfully proposed. Midoriya looked away in deep thought, as if weighing his options, while Pony stared intently, waiting for an answer. Yes, it does. Let's do it. What time should we leave? He asked, now finally sharing her enthusiasm. Let's meet by the front gate at 9 in the morning. That way we can bask in the sunny weather and we'll have plenty of time to enjoy ourselves. The girl happily suggested. Midoriya pulled out his phone to check and see if he had anything else to do tomorrow before turning his attention back towards Pony. That would be perfect, I'll see you then, Midoriya said with a smile before turning to leave. The young horn user went back inside while he walked back to his dorm. Midoriya looked up at the sky. It was an especially dark night, but the stars offered a nice view. I was going to do some more training, but she looked so happy. I just couldn't say no to her, he thought to himself while walking through the campus. Sometime later, Pony had gotten back to her room. She leaned against it, shutting it in process as her body draped down to the floor. She was sweating profusely as her breathing had grown heavier and her face reddened severely. This is tougher than I thought. Gotta keep my self-control though. The girl rested against the door for a while before finally mustering the strength to get up and walk over to the table. She grabbed a washcloth and wiped some sweat from her forehead before her attention drifted to the book her mother had given her. She picked it up and looked closely. I had some doubts, but that is no longer the case. Mother. He is the one that I've chosen. After a long night of sleep, Midoriya felt himself awake but was still very groggy. He found immense comfort in his pillow and rolled over on his side, closing his eyes again, clearly not ready to get up. Many minutes passed before the boy finally looked at his phone. Guess I better get ready, it's almost time to meet up with Pony. The boy thought to himself as he got out of bed. Like usually, he ran through his morning routine as he dragged himself to the bathroom. He took a quick shower and brushed his teeth. The boy followed up by putting on some black shorts and a white t-shirt, which would serve as his outfit for the day, and with that Midoriya had just gotten everything he needed to do done and felt a lot more refreshed and awake. The boy went back to his room to grab his phone and sent Iida and a couple of his other close friends in the class a text letting them know he'd be gone as he promised. As he was leaving, he grabbed a green zip-up hoodie and put it on, and followed up by promptly exiting the dorm. I have to get going. Pony is probably waiting on me at this point, he thought to himself as he realized that he may not have been considerate of her time. The boy wasted no time in sprinting through campus. Sometime later, he made it to the front gate and looked around. Pony had not arrived quite yet, so he took out his phone to check the news while he waited for her. Endeavor stops yet another bank robbery. Third one in less than half a week. He read the title silently to himself. I think I'm starting to get why Iida's so worried. Crime really has started going up drastically, it seems. The boy said to himself, worried. Ah, there you are. Sorry I didn't get here sooner. Midoriya put his phone away and looked over to see Pony happily approaching him and looking very excited. She opted to wear a sleeveless pink and white striped top with spaghetti straps and a pair of light blue ripped jeans. Oh, no worries. I was actually worried I might have kept you waiting. Midoriya brushed it off with a kind smile. Pony stopped in front of the boy and looked him up and down. You look nice, Izuku. I swear I could just eat you up here and now, she teased, causing the boy to blush in embarrassment from the praise. Oh, thank you. Why, you look nice as well, he stuttered out. The blonde girl giggled as she looked at the boy. She wasted no time in grabbing his hand and pulling him along. Come on. We've gotta get to the bus stop. The mall's not necessarily close after all, she said enthusiastically and excitedly. Midoriya was speechless though. His face had reddened even more and he practically sweating bullets as he looked at his hand. Oh my god, she's holding my hand. Why the hell is it so warm and soft? What is she doing to me? He internally panicked. About a block away, they'd finally reached the bus stop and Pony let go of the boy, allowing him to calm down a little as the two sat at the bench. Midoriya fidgeted in his seat as he waited anxiously for the bus while Pony seemed quite calm in contrast. I don't really hang out with people like this all that much anymore. Especially girls. Especially girls I don't know that well yet. But Pony is sweet, kind, and friendly. I wonder what she has in mind for us to do today. The boy thought to himself. Not a moment too soon the bus finally pulled up and the two young heroes in training arose from their seats and got in. Pony paid for both of them and the two found some empty seats in the back where they sat down together. The bus proceeded to pull back onto the road and continue on its scheduled route. So, what do you have planned for the day, Pony? The boy turned to her and asked. Glad you asked. There's this new store that sells merch from some of the most popular and trending anime and manga. I want to check it out. The blonde explained. This statement lit a gleam in Midoriya's eye as she piqued his curiosity. You like anime and manga? What kind? He asked, now probably more excited than he'd been at point prior. Pony put her finger up to her chin with a thoughtful expression. I can't really pin one genre down as my favorite. Isekai, seinen, mecha, just about everything interests me so long as it's done well enough. Pony casually explained. Wow, that's so awesome, Midoriya excitedly proclaimed. Upon hearing this, Pony had to make a conscious effort not to squeal in excitement as she looked at the boy. So I take it you like anime and manga too, don't you, Izuku? She gleefully inquired. Midoriya nodded in affirmation with a wide and joy-filled smile on his face. Yes, of course. I've always been a big fan of heroes, so naturally I'd gravitate towards them as well. Since they are so similar to all the amazing heroes that help protect our society today. One of my favorites is The Adventures of Captain Punch, and then there's classics like Who Killed Ronnie the Rooster. The boy responded with a passion she'd seldom seen in him before. Pony stared at the boy, her mouth agape in fascination, and a light blush ran across her face as she watched him start to babble on about his particular interests. He even shares my hobbies. So adorable. The blonde-haired girl snapped out of her blissful thoughts and leaned in on her elbow, listening intently and with great interest to every word he said. Later on, the bus finally stopped at the mall, causing Pony and Midoriya to refocus on reality and promptly get off the bus. All right, come on. I don't want to waste any time, Pony passionately declared and took off running towards the entrance. Midoriya was shocked by her energy and speed as he didn't expect this from her. Pony, wait for me, he yelled out in a panic as he ran after her. The mall was excessively large, making it so that walking anywhere would take a while, yet even so Pony had no issue getting around with impressive speed from her horse-like quirk that gave her such powerful legs. Barely managing to keep up with her, Midoriya had just followed her into the building. As he chased after her, the boy looked around and could immediately tell that the place was busy and full of life. The interior was well taken care of and full of bright green plants that seemed to be thriving, and the centerpiece seemed to come in the form of a waterfall on the side that they passed by. Pony finally stopped by the elevator leading up to the upper floors and pressed the call button. As they waited, she turned to face Midoriya again. The boy was looking at a sign that showed a basic layout of the mall. Looks like this place has 10 floors. So which one is it on? He inquired. It's on the 6th floor, near the other side around where we just came in from. The blonde answered. As she spoke, the elevator finally came down and the two young heroes got inside. The horn user promptly pressed the button to go to the 6th floor. Pony stood leaning against the railing as Midoriya watched anxiously, waiting as he really wanted to see the new place that they were gonna check out after his adorably cheerful acquaintance had so deeply and effectively aroused his curiosity and excitement. The elevator door opened and the two stepped out and proceeded to head to their destination. Midoriya glanced down from the railing to see the lower floors. The ground where they'd only just been standing a minute ago was barely visible now that they were so high up. Oh look, they have a food court too. Let's come back and check it out later. Pony excitedly pointed, causing the boy to look in that direction. The food court was fairly busy as more than half of the tables were filled with people eating and mingling while a line of customers stood right in the middle. That's a great idea, I really could use something to eat. Midoriya happily agreed. As they got closer, Midoriya noticed just how many people were here. The further they walked, the more crowded it became. All sorts of folks had gathered around. all of them surrounding the new store. The crowd was so massive that went back several yards. Well shit, I didn't think there'd be so many people excited about this. Guess it'll be a while before we can even get into the store. Pony dejectedly stated with a disappointed frown. Midoriya stared at the crowd and knew it wouldn't be possible to get in any earlier without needlessly aggravating the people that had been waiting fair and square for who knows how long, and given the nature of the business one could not tell how long it would take for a customer to get bored and leave or decide they have enough. He looked at his disappointed companion and felt saddened. The shop is still open till late into the evening. Let's just go back to the food court and get something to eat, he said while placing a hand on her shoulder and offering a sympathetic smile. Pony looked up and stared into the boy's warm green eyes. The girl smiled sadly as she looked at him. Okay, let's go, she said in response, and the two went back to the place they'd previously passed. About 20 minutes later, Midoriya had finally made it to the food counter and placed an order. He stepped to the side and took a look around. The food court wasn't as busy as it was a bit ago, but still far from dead. The boy couldn't help but smile as he looked around. Everyone was so happy and at peace as they joked and ate and mingled with one another. Moments like these are the representation of the beauty of peace. We have to appreciate them. Yes, this is the world I want to fight for. His thoughts took a serious turn as he looked down at his hand and clenched his fist. The boy was shook from his thoughts by the sound of a tray being set on the counter behind him. Here's your order. Hope you enjoy it, young man. An older employee wearing a red and yellow striped work uniform said with a smile. Thank you very much, the green-haired boy politely said with a bow before taking his meal and walking over to join Pony, who'd already gotten her food and was ferociously chowing down. Midoriya quietly took a seat across from Pony and started to eat his meal as well. He glanced over at the horn user and looked slightly stunned. Well, she's certainly got an appetite, it seems. Pony had ordered enough food for 3 and yet she was already nearly done with it as she shoved her French fries in her mouth and chugged her soda down hard. Tearing his eyes away from the girl, he started to slowly eat his cheeseburger. Contrary to the blonde, he saw fit to purchase far less to eat, yet it was still enough to get some nutritional value out of. Damn, this stuff's good. No wonder this place is so busy all the time, Pony said as she finally finished her meal and grabbed a napkin to wipe her face clean. The boy swallowed a bite of his burger and placed it down on the tray. Yeah, it's actually pretty good food. Seems you really enjoyed it anyway, the boy casually stated with a chuckle. Pony looked down and then to the side to see what he meant and shrugged nonchalantly. Being a mutation type, my quirk sometimes gives me some rather unusual habits and traits. One of those being a fluctuating appetite. I promise you I don't pig out like this too often, the girl explained, slightly embarrassed. Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to be rude or anything. I really don't mind at all, Midoriya responded, feeling guilty about what he said. Oh no, please don't worry, ABO. A loud crash abruptly cut the conversation short, immediately alerting Pony and Midoriya, who turned to the direction where it originated from only to see a giant hole in the wall next to the food court. Debris and smoke enveloped the area as a large silhouette of a person stepped outside. Man, what a haul. This'll get me by for weeks, possibly even months. The two young heroes looked onward, both with a serious glare and a displeased scowl as they stood up from the table, ready to leap at the malicious vandal that had the nerve to commit such a violent and reckless crime in broad daylight. The two young heroes looked closely at the criminal. He was a large man with orange spiky hair and looked to be anywhere up to 7 feet tall and built like a tank. He didn't bother to wear a shirt, showing off an impressive physique, the only article of clothing being a pair of black baggy pants. One could easily assume that he was a man that took what he wanted without a care in the world about the consequences. Pony helped the civilians evacuate. I'll keep this villain busy, Izuku said to his partner. The blonde-haired girl looked back and forth between Izuku and the villain with a look of concern and uncertainty. Are you sure about that? He looks dangerous, she asked, worried. Izuku looked at her and nodded confidently, clearly ready to face the crook. The boy then turned his attention back to the villain as he took off his hoodie and tossed it on a nearby chair. As he charged forward, Pony looked around at all the people panicking, screaming, and running around in fear. She quickly jumped up onto a table. Everyone calm down. My name is Pony and I'm a hero. Everything is going to be alright. You need to all to follow my instructions so that I may get you out of here safely. The girl shouted aloud, gaining the attention of all the citizens. A hero? She looks pretty weak for a hero. Is she one of those UA students? The citizens' looks all turned to confusion and uncertainty as they looked at the girl. Alright, I want everyone to calmly and carefully proceed to the stairs and head downwards towards the exit. Do not rush, push, or do anything sporadic along the way, as you may endanger yourselves or one another. I shall protect you while you evacuate. The girl spoke clearly and calmly with a commanding and certain tone. The fear-stricken bystanders all nodded and started to head for the stairs as Pony looked over to see Izuku keeping the villain busy. I better keep an eye on them, but I don't think that scoundrel will be able to get anywhere near the civilians with Izuku nearby. The mall's alarm had activated after the villain attack and everyone was in a panic as a result. Pony looked down from the railing and noticed chaos ensuing on every level. Damn it, the pros better get here soon. I won't be able to manage this many people all at once. The horn user thought to herself in frustration. The girl took her horns and pulled them from her head with a fierce look in her eye. But even so, I am a hero. I can't give up just because things are less than ideal. As the blonde focused on the task at hand, Izuku did his part confronting the enemy. What's your deal, kid? I'm just trying to make a withdrawal. The villain spoke condescendingly. You know that money's not yours, give it up and come quietly. Izuku said as he charged in, reeling his fist back to strike the man across the face. The attack hit head-on and even did visible damage as Izuku bruised the man's cheek, but the villain raised his arm to retaliate, forcing Izuku to dodge. Not bad, kid. Not bad at all, but this ain't my first rodeo. The orange-haired man arrogantly boasted as he raised his hand and watched it change form into a large sword. Midoriya narrowed his eyes as he prepared to strike again, but suddenly his foe charged forward and started to slash at the boy. Some kind of transformation quirk. The blade is very long and sharp. It might be difficult to close the distance from the front without risking serious injury. He observed his foe's fighting style while jumping away, narrowly avoiding his first attack. The villain continued to move forward, slashing at Midoriya repetitively and cutting up any solid wall, table, or railing that came into contact along the way. Taking advantage of a missed underhand strike, Midoriya slid past him and kicked his knee in, forcing the villain to the ground and slamming his fist into his side. The man grunted in pain from the solid strike to his side and used his untransformed hand to grab the boy's arm before it could hit him again. You're a feisty little shit, aren't ya? I think you just broke one of my ribs. He yelled in rage as he threw Midoriya against the railing. Midoriya was barely able to dodge as the villain quickly closed the distance, tried to slice him apart once more. As the foe missed his attack, cutting railing in half, instead the green-haired boy let out a flurry of weaker punches at his unguarded torso. Unfazed, the villain quickly knocked Midoriya to the ground and jumped up into the air before coming down on top of the young hero and breaking the ground apart on impact, forcing him to land painfully on the 5th floor. The orange-haired man raised his sword arm and tried to slice open the young hero's face, only for him to narrowly move his to the right, where it penetrated the floor beneath them. Midoriya, now looking angrier, grabbed the back of the man's neck from his position with one arm and started to punch him in the face repeatedly with the other. The villain was stunned by the first hit, landing and effectively breaking his nose while violently drawing blood as the following hits did similar damage. All right, that tears it. The villain roared out in fury as he broke the sword off of his limb and the damaged appendage returned to the normal form of his hand before grabbing the young hero and throwing him off past the railing. The green-haired boy was sent falling through the air and looked at the ground in fear and shock as he could do nothing but brace himself for a painful landing. Right as he was about to crash, he felt himself grabbed mid-air right in the nick of time. Izuku, are you all right? Pony said while holding him and floating in the air with the use of her horns. Yeah, I'm okay, but that villain's quite dangerous and seems to have quite an impressive pain tolerance. We've gotta be careful, the green-haired boy responded. The two heroes looked up to see the villain jumping down from one floor to the next, using the railings until he met them at ground level with a visibly disgruntled look on his face. Midoriya got out of Pony's arms and hopped onto the floor and looked at the man with a determined glint in his eye. Once broken, my blade takes a whole 3 weeks to repair itself. That means I'm effectively quirkless right now. On top of that, the other heroes will be here soon. The villain thought to himself with a troubled look on his face. Many civilians were still fleeing from the mall, doing their best to stay away from the conflict in the center of it all. Pony already moved to circle around, ready to guard the innocents should the need arise. This area was supposed to have little hero surveillance today due to all the other incidents in other parts of town. I really want to tear this kid in half, but I can't stay here. I'll have to make a break for it. The man turned around, prepared to retreat from the scene. And just where do you think you're going? A deep booming voice shouted from above. The villain looked up to see a flaming high-speed object come ready to crash right into him. In the next moment, the mall shook with a loud ear-piercing crash as debris were scattered everywhere. Midoriya raised his arms to guard his face. After the dust settles, he looked to see what had just happened. The villain had been effectively taken out, and standing over him was a tall man that carried himself with a sense of stoicism and pride. Endeavor. What a relief, Izuku said to himself, relieved as he looked on in amazement of the #1 hero that had long since taken up All Might's job as society's new protector. The flame hero stepped away from the villain and flipped him over before binding his wrists so the police could take him away. Sometime later, the mall was closed down for repairs, and Midoriya was sitting in the back of an immobile ambulance where the paramedics treated his injuries. He perked up as he heard footsteps coming towards him. Sorry, things got a little crazy. Today was supposed to be a fun and relaxing day. The boy couldn't help but smile as Pony came over with a couple sodas in hand. She gave one to Midoriya and sat beside him in the back of the ambulance. Oh no, it's okay. Please don't worry about it. It's just fortunate that things didn't turn out worse than they could have. The boy said reassuringly, as he didn't want her to feel bad for something that wasn't her fault. We'll just have to hang out again some other day, I guess. Not like we need a villain attack to justify that though, the blonde said with a shrug. The green-haired boy looked into the distance with a thoughtful expression across his face. He soon turned to the girl with an excited look on his face. Hey Pony, how do you feel about sports? We could see if any of the other students around our school are up for it. The boy offered with much enthusiasm. The horn user gave it some thought before turning back to the boy, her enthusiasm matching his own. I like the way you think, let's totally do it, she answered joyously and filled with enthusiasm. Midoriya grinned at the girl's excitement, but he soon turned around to see a familiar face approaching. Hey, it's All Might, Pony said excitedly as she pointed out the man who seemed to be running right towards them. Oh, thank goodness you kids are all right. I was so worried when I heard the news, the retired hero said, relieved to see his students safe. Midoriya was surprised when the man hugged him tightly, but had to resist the urge to cry out in happiness as he embraced him back. Pony looked at the two with rapidly increasing annoyance as she felt her eye twitch. Hey, All Might let go of his young apprentice and looked over, confused by the sudden outburst. You meanie, I want an All Might hug too, the horn user whined out like a spoiled child who had not gotten her way. The two Alpha users looked at each briefly and each snickered in amusement. Oh right, please forgive me, young Tsunotori, Toshinori said apologetically before reaching out to hug the girl too. Pony hugged him back with an ecstatic grin while Midoriya looked at the two with a bemused expression. All Might soon let go of the young hero in training, much to Pony's disappointment. Have the police come to take a verbal report from you two on the situation yet? He soon inquired afterwards. Both of the teens shook their heads, telling him that they'd yet to do so. We were just about to head back to school right about now. Pony soon spoke up, interrupting All Might's thoughts. The blonde older man just about felt his heart stop the moment he heard this. Whoa now, young Tsunotori, you know that you guys can't leave until you've told the police exactly what happened. The man frantically warned, trying to rein in her lack of patience for the matter at hand. Pony froze up with a blank look across her face as his words haunted her. Oh, I totally forgot about that, man, it's really been a day. Midoriya spoke up with an embarrassed chuckle. Well, how long will that take? Pony said, feeling empty inside as the prospect of such a boring wait filled her with dread. The older man placed a finger on his chin in thought about the girl's question. Well, could take up to an hour if I'm being honest. He finally answered, much to blonde girl's dismay. Pony didn't even have any response to what she just heard as her head slumped against the side of the ambulance in deep despair. Ah, don't be like that now. I'll tell ya what, while we wait for them I'll regale you with exciting action-packed tales from my glory days, and afterwards I'll take you both out to get ice cream. My treat. All Might offered, trying to cheer the two up. Pony and Midoriya both looked at one another and felt a sense of excitement after hearing that. That sounds like a great idea, All Might. Can you tell us about your time fighting in America? Midoriya asked with a great intrigue. The older man nodded in agreement and sat down between the two young heroes in training. The next morning had come and all the students were back in class after their day off. Everyone was currently taking a short test to summarize some of their most recent lessons. Midoriya looked over his answers, having been one of the first to finish and feeling pretty confident in his answers, yet double-checking them regardless. We can ask for permission to use the gym one of these days after class. I'm sure they'll allow it if we tell them it's for hand-eye coordination training. Let's get everybody on board first though. Although he tried to focus, the boy couldn't help but recall Pony's words from the night prior as they were eating dessert with All Might at one of his favorite food joints. Everything looks fine to me here, he quietly muttered to himself as he pushed the test to the side. Sometime later and it seemed like mostly everyone was done. All right, time's up. Pass your tests up to the person in your front row so we can move on to more practical subjects of study. Aizawa firmly spoke up. For the most part everybody did just that as they waited for Aizawa to pick up the papers and move on to the next subject. Ah, damn it, I only had a few more to go. Kaminari whined. Incompetence is no excuse for failure. Aizawa coldly responded while picking up the tests and tossing them on his desk in a messy fashion. The electrically charged Hero face-palmed himself in disappointment. Now everyone grab your gym clothes and head to ground beta. It's time to get in some actual training. The black-haired teacher spoke firmly. Elsewhere, another class of UA were already training at ground gamma after having finished their other assignments for the day. Alright, heads up you guys. This one's gonna be a powerful one, Kendo said as she grabbed an enlarged wooden ball. Kaibara looked on with confidence as he prepared to use his quirk to destroy the obstacle. It didn't take long before Kendo threw the object forward at alarming speeds. Let's do this, the black-haired boy shouted as he thrust his arms forward in their standard gyrating motion. The ball made impact and quickly forced Kaibara back, but not without him being able to damage the surface almost immediately upon impact. I got you, man, Tetsu yelled out as he caught his partner and slowed down the pushback. Kaibara thrust his arms forward even more, penetrating the wooden ball even further while refusing to let up until he destroyed the entire thing. Kendo watched, entertained by the spectacle she just witnessed. Impressive. You almost stopped it within the boundary line, she commented while pointing behind them. The two boys groaned in disappointment as they looked behind them and saw that Tetsu's foot had just barely touched the line. And that's another point for Team Throwers, bringing the score up to 4 points against Team Interceptors' 2 points. Pony excitedly declared as she changed the scoreboard for everyone to see. Kendo soon prepared another ball while Kaibara returned to his original position in preparation for the next throw. Do you think they'll make a comeback? Kuwaro asked as he casually approached Pony and looked at the two competing teams. Pony sat down in the chair leaning against the scoreboard and looked between both sides. It's hard to say if I'm being honest. Kendo actually looks like she's not even fired up yet, while those last few balls seemed to have been cracking down on Kaibara's stamina. The blonde answered, giving her assessment. The shadow hero looked between both sides as well with a thoughtful expression while leaning against the scoreboard. I don't think we can count them out yet, they still seem determined, he said, looking closely. Yui enlarged another ball so that Kendo could throw it again and stepped out of the way, allowing the orange-haired heroine to make her play. Not keen on keeping the game stalled, Kendo immediately wound up her arm with a confident expression. Get ready, Tetsu. I'm in no mood to go down without a fight, Kaibara fiercely shouted, more than prepared to meet his classmates' challenge head-on. Kendo threw yet another powerful pitch, almost as if she were trying to put her opponent in the hospital. Kaibara once again activated his quirk in order to destroy it and with a serious expression faced the challenge head-on, thrusting his gyrating arms forward. The wooden ball made impact once again, pushing the boy back hard and fast. Tetsu played his part in helping stop his partner and pushed back with all his strength. "Come on!" Kaibara yelled, full of adrenaline as he gradually eroded away the surface of the ball, followed by the underlying levels as well. It was only a matter of time before the black-haired boy neutralized the object, yet in the face of uncertainty he couldn't celebrate just yet. Kaibara turned around, hoping not to see the line under their feet again. Team Interceptor has successfully staved off the throw, scoring themselves another crucial point towards taking back the lead. The score is now up 4-3. Pony happily narrated as she put another point down for the boys. "Oh hell yeah," the two boys shouted with excitement and pride while high-fiving each other. Later on, the match had concluded as a tie while everyone else had also finished their training as well, and Class B were all headed back to their classroom. "So what did ya think of Kendo's throwing power? She's gotten really strong lately," Setsuna commented. "It's very impressive. Honestly, I can hardly believe she's gotten so strong lately," Pony said with admiration. Everyone soon got back to class and took their seats. Vlad soon stood before them and looked ready to tell them something. "Now I'm sure you're all very excited about getting out of school for the day, but before I dismiss you there is something very important I need to explain to you," the older hero explained. The class all looked at him curiously, seemingly giving their undivided attention. "In the coming weeks we will start having hero work studies available for you young heroes to take part in. They aren't mandatory or even easy to obtain for that matter, but this essentially means that it'll be possible for you to be taken on as a sidekick to a hero agency and actively help keep the city safe under their supervision." The class all lit up with excitement, and it didn't take long before some questions arose. "Are there any agencies we can't pick, or is this something where anyone could take us on as sidekicks?" Narengeki asked. "As we've shown time and time again, UA's top priority is the safety of our students, so this means that you'll need to pick an agency with a good track record. Picking one with an abhorrently low success rate is out of the question," Vlad answered in response. Pony looked out the window with a seemingly bored expression across her face. "I have heard of these work studies before, but I can't say I'm terribly intrigued. Not against the idea, but really, I bet Izuku will definitely try and get into one though," the horn user thought to herself. "We'll be having some of the senior UA students come in to explain more about the program to you sometime within the coming weeks. Right now I'm just giving you the heads up about it. You're all free to go now," Vlad concluding before dismissing the class. Everyone got up and proceeded to exit the classroom. Pony trailed behind, not wanting to get caught up in the crowd. She stopped by the door and looked around in search of a particular person. "Oh, there he is." The blonde lit up with excitement as she raced towards a certain green-haired boy. "Hey Izuku, there you are." The boy turned around, wondering who could be calling out to him, only to find Pony waving at him with an excited look on her face. "Oh hello Pony, did you want me to help you study again tonight?" Midoriya politely asked the girl. Pony nodded in affirmation of his question with a gleeful look in her eye. "I feel like we're getting really close to some of the more beneficial topics for study," the blonde told him. The door opened right as they were talking and Bakugo walked out. He looked between the two in front of him. "Did you go and find yourself another worthless extra to hang around with Deku?" he asked in a cold and brash manner with an annoyed scowl on his face. "Oh Kachan. No. This is Pony from Class 1B, I'm just helping her study after school," the green-haired boy nervously responded. Pony looked at the explosion hero and waved with an uncertain look. Bakugo scoffed at the statement and let out a cocky grin. "She must not be very capable if she needs help from a loser like you," he said condescendingly before walking past the two. Midoriya bowed his head in shame and disappointment as his childhood friend's words sunk in. "Hey." Bakugo turned around with a confused expression, only to see a very agitated Pony stomping over to him. "You take that back. Say what you want about me, it doesn't matter one bit as far as I'm concerned. But you don't talk that way about my precious little greenie baby," she yelled at the blonde-haired boy. "And what are you gonna do about it?" Bakugo screamed in unhinged rage while slamming his hand against the wall near her, creating an explosive effect to try and intimidate the girl. Unfazed by his efforts, Pony leaned in closer while looking up at him. "Take it back, now." Midoriya came over and tried to pull the girl away. "Pony, please just let it go. I'm used to it, it's really not worth fighting over." Neither one of the two blondes regarded his words as they stared at each other intently, not budging an inch. Midoriya panicked as he couldn't help but imagine the worst, seeing them both so fired up. Eventually though, Bakugo turned away in annoyance, waving them off. "Guess you've got some guts after all, horn face. I'll be damned if I'm gonna apologize to that stupid nerd though," he said, disgruntled. Pony watched the boy walk before eventually turning back to her friend. "Why do you let that jerk treat you like that? You know he'll never concede unless you make him right," she asked. Midoriya nervously chuckled while looking away from the girl. "It doesn't really bother me for the most part. He's been that way since we were kids," he submissively replied on the matter. Pony scowled upon hearing her friend say such a thing. "If I hear that asshole talk to you again like that, then you'd better get me a body bag for what I'm gonna do to him," she fiercely declared as she grabbed her books. Midoriya looked at the girl, frozen in shock at how adamant she was about her feelings. The blonde took a deep breath to calm herself down and turned back towards the green-haired boy with a renewed sense of kindness. "At any rate, it's not worth ruining our day over this. Now come along, sweetie, we have a lot of studying to do," she said sweetly while grabbing the boy's hand and pulling him along. Okay." Midoriya looked at the girl with a bewildered expression upon his face. "Pony is really scary when she's mad, but why is she calling me sweetie? We're not that close, are we?" the boy thought to himself in confusion. With nothing left for discussion, Midoriya allowed the girl to pull him away with her to the dorms to resume their studying. A few hours passed, and as they did before, the two heroes in training continued to go over the books in Pony's room. So the idea is to use your horns as a means to damage enemy weaponry from afar, making it safer for the other heroes to possibly charge the perpetrator. It could also help reduce the danger that any nearby citizens are in if the villains can't shoot or hurt them. Midoriya happily explained another way for the girl to apply her quirk. Pony stared at the boy with intrigue and amazement as he had her deeply invested in conversation once again. The green-haired boy looked back at the book sitting before them and went to turn the page. "Ow." The blonde's eyes gravitated towards his finger and a look of worry grazed her face. "Oh no, you're bleeding," the girl said, looking at his finger. Almost as if not even acting on thought, she yanked the boy's hand over and placed the cut finger in her mouth. The boy froze in shock and horror as his face turned beet red. He was fixated on the sight in front of him, but his mind couldn't even process what was happening in that moment. "Pony," he yelled out in shock as he pulled his finger away and tried to wipe away the wet sensation. The blonde looked at him with a blank expression as she watched him panic like he'd just been attacked. "Geez, you're so jittery. I was just helping stop the bleeding," she defensively pouted while crossing her arms. "You didn't have to on my finger like that. I just need a band-aid," he yelled in an awkward tone. Pony shrugged and got up before approaching her dresser and pulling out the top drawer, which seemed to be full of random odds and ends. She proceeded to pull out a band-aid and kneel down towards the boy. "All right, you pouty crybaby, this what you want?" she asked rhetorically as she grabbed his arm again and slowly and gently wrapped the band-aid around his finger. Izuku looked away while blushing, unable to take her seriously nor figure out what she must have been thinking at that very moment. Pony pressed firmly on the band-aid to make sure it was secure and looked at her handiwork with a content smile. "Are you done, Yi?" And then the doting blonde gave it a quick and gentle kiss just to be safe. "Oog." The boy let out an exasperated groan as he cupped his face in embarrassment, finding it literally impossible to so much as look at the girl in that moment. Pony cupped her cheek as she giggled while standing up. She looked at the boy with an adoring smile. "You've been working hard all for my sake. So tonight I'll cook you a special dinner with all the extra bells and whistles to send you to gourmet heaven." Midoriya smeared his hand across his face in a futile attempt to rub the blush out of his cheeks before looking up at her with a curious albeit slightly skeptical expression across his face. "You know how to cook?" he asked with a brow raised in suspicion. The girl looked down at him with a confident expression as she pounded against her chest with her right hand in a prideful manner. "You just wait, handsome. I'm gonna knock your socks off with this one," she declared before leaving the room. Now alone with only his thoughts, the green-haired boy face planted against the table in defeat. "I wish she wouldn't tease like that. There's no way a mediocre weirdo like me could ever have a chance with such a cute and bubbly and amazing girl like her." After a few moments of internally bashing his self-image, the boy raised his head and looked at the books he was helping her study. A sad smile graced his face as he looked at the book. "She has to be joking around. I must say it's a weird sense of humor she's got though. We don't have time for something like romance anyways, at least I don't. I have to keep aiming for the title of hero. It's the only thing I want, to make others feel safe and happy just like All Might used to do," the boy said to himself, reaffirming to himself that his dream was a righteous goal. An hour passed and Midoriya simply waited for the girl to finish prepping whatever surprise she had for him. The boy laid against the ground with his head resting against a beanbag she had sitting at the end of the room by her bed. "I'm back. Sorry for the wait, but dinner is served," the horn user joyously shouted as she entered the room once more. Midoriya looked up tiredly at the plate as she handed it to him and took a seat on her bed. "Meatloaf with a large side of steamed carrots and mashed potatoes and gravy," he asked, looking at the plate. "I noticed you were having trouble reading the signs at the mall the other day. The only sensible conclusion is that you aren't eating enough carrots, if any at all," the blonde responded. The green-haired boy looked at the plate for a moment before starting to eat the carrots first. He slowly chewed it up as he savored the taste for a moment. "Wow, these are actually pretty well done," he thought to himself in amazement. Before long Midoriya started to scarf up the carrots around his plate as if he were some sort of starved glutton. However, Pony didn't actually seem to take interest in him enjoying the meal as she lay down against her bed with a thoughtful expression. Not much time passed before Midoriya emptied the plate's contents into his stomach and set it down with an enthusiastic grin across his face. "That really was amazing. Thank you so much, Pony," he said as he turned to face her. Midoriya's smile turned into concern as he saw her just laying there staring into the space. Right before he could ask her what's wrong though, she turned to him. "Hey Izuku, you wanna be a hero, right?" she suddenly asked with complete seriousness. The boy was surprised by this question as it seemed to him like the answer was quite obvious. "Well, of course I do. I want to save people with a smile and make them feel happy and secure like hope has not been lost," the boy answered with seriousness. The blonde took a moment to let his answer soak in with a content smile. "So, would you mind being my hero for a change?" she followed up. Midoriya looked confused yet again as he thought about what she could have meant. "Would you fight for my smile? Would you do what you must to make me happy? Just like all your friends and all those innocents out there?" she continued. The boy finally looked at her as if he knew what he needed to say to her. "Of course I would, but what exactly do you mean by that?" he asked, bewildered. Pony got up from the bed and reached out to hug the boy, much to his surprise. "I won't ask for much. Just make me a promise. Promise me that you will never leave me in the darkness. Promise that you'll do what you can to make me happy. I couldn't bear the thought of losing a precious friend." The blonde hugged him tighter as she confided in him. Midoriya was left in shock as he recalled the last conversation they had a few days ago. He was at a loss for words. "You'd put it all on the line, wouldn't you? Sacrifice your life for others so they can smile. But how can we, knowing our friend, isn't there to smile with us?" Pony finally broke down, sobbing into the boy's shoulder. A few moments of almost complete silence passed before Midoriya finally managed to snap out of his state of shock. He pushed the girl back while holding her by the shoulders so they were looking directly at each other. "All right, Pony, I'll make you that promise," he mumbled, just barely loud enough to be heard. The blonde wiped away her tears and held out her pinky towards the boy. "You can't just promise. I need you to pinky promise that you'll keep your word on this," she firmly stated. Without a moment of hesitation or doubt, the boy held out his pinky as well, and the promise was officially made. The night passed by smoothly and Midoriya was now walking down the halls with a calm, contemplative look upon his face. Much to his contentment, he was able to get another good night's worth of studying done with Pony, yet he couldn't help but wonder what she meant with the promise she'd had him make. How could this affect my hero work if I take it too seriously? Obviously many villains won't be as caring and considerate of their own well-being along with others. A hero's life is always on the line. As the green-haired boy was in deep thought, he absent-mindedly entered the classroom for 1A and took his seat, paying no mind to anything or anyone around him. "All right class, everyone pay attention now," Aizawa spoke up, gaining mostly everyone's eyes and ears. The black-haired teacher scowled in annoyance as he extended his cloth, forcibly choking the boy back into reality. "Midoriya." The boy's eyes widened in shock as his throat closed up under the tight confines of the binds. Aizawa coldly observed as his inattentive student suffered but let go soon, not wanting to waste too much time on disciplinary action. Sorry Mr. Aizawa," Midoriya breathed out as he leaned against his desk trying to catch his breath. The eraser hero paid his hollow words no mind as he retracted his cloth. "As I was saying, today you'll be learning about hero work studies. We want to turn you kids into the most effective and powerful among this country's protectors, and that means you should have these options available to gain a new perspective as well as experience you simply won't find in the gym or the textbooks," Aizawa continued to explain to the students. Everyone seemed interested enough in what they'd just heard as they stared at the teacher with curiosity. "Anyways, that's enough from me, sorry to keep you guys waiting. You can come in now," Aizawa said while looking towards the door. Right as he said that, 3 older students entered the room and stood before the class. "Whoa, hold on. That's the dude I saw earlier on. Mirio Tagata." The green-haired boy stared at the 3 seniors with a deeply thoughtful expression across his face, seemingly curious on what they had to say. Later on in the gym, Midoriya held his stomach in pain as he heard the older blonde continue to explain hero work studies. "And that's what it's like to have our experience in the field," Mirio proudly explained. "We all just got punched in the stomach." The boy thought to himself, unsure of how this would be informative for anyone. "It's so not fair. You have a much stronger quirk," Mina complained aloud. "So not true. I barely had any control over my quirk when I first started training. It's only as strong as it is because I trained hard to make it so," Mirio explained to the class. The green-haired boy was snapped out of his distracting thoughts as he heard Mirio say that, and he listened to the older boy tell his story of how he improved his quirk with a curious and inquisitive expression across his face. Later on, class had concluded and the boy was frantically looking around for Mirio in order to ask him something. "Where did he go? I have to talk to him," Midoriya quietly muttered to himself as he looked around trying to pick the older blonde apart from all the students he'd surrounded himself with. Much time had passed since they concluded their introduction to hero work studies, and the boy had learned that Mirio was a part of the Night Eye Agency from All Might. "If I can get a work study under the sidekick of All Might himself, then I could learn so much about becoming a better hero," the boy thought to himself. Suddenly he heard his phone pick up and went to answer it. "Hello," he asked, speaking into the device. "Hey Izuku, it's Pony. I was wondering if you can pick something up for me on the other side of town. I know it's quite a favor to ask, but it's a book I'll need to help with the next portion of my studies," the blonde girl asked of him. "Oh sure, of course I will Pony. I'll bring it by later." The boy didn't hesitate to agree with a supportive smile on his face. Pony giggled as she leaned against the fence alongside the front gate and looked at one of her most trusted friends who she'd just asked to accompany her. "I appreciate it, sweetie. Wanna have another study session tonight when you drop it off? We can open it up and get right into the topics I need to learn about," the horn user asked in her infectiously sweet tone. Midoriya let out a soft smile as he started to walk away from the halls and towards the exit, already intent on seeing her wishes be granted. "Of course. That sounds like a great idea. I'll see you later at the dorms," he said in a happy tone. "Sounds like a date. Stay safe on your way out. Oh, and I'll send you the directions to the bookstore where it's being held," Pony happily replied, letting the boy off the line. "I guess finding Tagata and asking him to introduce me to Night Eye will have to wait for now," the boy thought to himself as he left to pick up what Pony asked of him. Sometime later the green-haired boy had just left the bookstore with Pony's delivery in hand and proceeded to return to campus when he suddenly felt something bump into his leg and looked over to his left. "Whoa there, are you okay? Looks like you had a tumble." Midoriya reached his hand out to a young girl with a small horn on her head. The girl looked at him with a terrified expression across her face as her entire body was shaking. Two figures eerily sauntered behind her, making themselves known as the young hero's eyes gravitated towards the newcomers. "You should be more careful, Eri. We don't wanna cause the heroes any trouble," a black-haired man with a plague mask said in a cold manner. The girl grabbed hold of the boy tightly, causing him to look back at her with concern. "Excuse me, but your daughter looks scared." The boy spoke up, expressing his slowly growing concerns and looking to find out more about their relationship. The black-haired man narrowed his eyes in annoyance. A reaction to being scolded. He callously responded, "And what's with these bandages? Why would a little girl need to be covered in them?" He continued to prod. "She's just been playing in the street. Her recklessness tends to get the better of her," he continually said to the boy. The girl looked at the young hero with teary, fear-filled eyes as her uncontrollable shaking never ceased. Please don't leave," she quietly muttered. The masked man continued to glare at the two in front of them, his patience seemingly growing thinner by the second. "I really think it's time that we took our leave. Come along, Eri, now." Midoriya eyed the older man suspiciously as he held onto the girl tightly with a protective embrace. "Tell me, what exactly have you been doing to this girl?" he spoke with deadly seriousness. The green-haired boy locked eyes with the older man, his gaze never faltering. Within them he saw a cold, scrutinizing glare that was equally unmoving. After what seemed like forever, the man averted his eyes as he pulled his hand up to rub his forehead in exasperation. "You heroes really do pick up on the most subtle of things, don't you? Very well. Follow me and I'll fill you in on everything you wish to know." Midoriya's eyes darted between the two suspicious men before he reluctantly stood up and followed them down the alleyway as Eri followed with a fear-stricken expression across her face. As the boy followed, he noticed the black-haired man took his glove off. He carefully eyed his every move, preparing for the chance of retaliation. "Finally done with your temper tantrum." Eri quickly ran back to the black-haired man, much to Midoriya's surprise. She went back to him, even though she's so afraid. "Why?" the boy thought to himself. "Well now, I think it's time we took our leave. I bid you good day, hero," he said, wanting to part ways as soon as he could. Midoriya clenched his teeth in anger and frustration as he saw them prepared to leave while disregarding his concerns for the girl. "Hold it, you haven't answered my question. What have you been doing to her?" the boy yelled out, refusing to be ignored. The black-haired man looked back at the hero, the thin, hollow facade of a reasonable man having broken down completely as his eyes were filled with silent but hate-filled fury. "Like I would ever expect you to understand, I'm working towards the greater good. You heroes are corrupted and disillusioned by your own hubris." With those words he continued to walk away, clearly having no interest in answering the question. "Rappa, try and be discreet. Either way, make sure that hero doesn't live to wake up tomorrow." The other man, now identified as Rappa, stepped back and turned towards the boy with a sadistic, gleeful smile across his face. "With pleasure, Overhaul," he said as Midoriya watched the other two leave and tried to pursue. The boy got off to a running start and leapt from wall to wall right over Rappa's head, intent on catching up to the other man. Within seconds, though, Rappa caught up in a single jump and caught the boy midair before violently throwing him to the ground. "Let go of me, you bastard!" Midoriya yelled as he violently struggled to either push or beat the mont's arm off of him. The bulky behemoth chuckled in response as he tightened his grip on the boy. "Come on, kid, I see that look in your eye. The look of an unyielding force of willpower. I can tell you're strong, so why don't you forget about that weak little girl and have an exhilarating deathmatch with me instead?" Whilst listening to the lunatic atop him rambling on, Midoriya finally managed to narrowly break free and immediately jumped away, quickly following the path his target had taken. Damn it, where did he go? How could he have covered so much ground in so little time? The boy asked himself as he kept quick on his feet while jerking his head side to side, trying to find the man and the girl. But just as he was doing that, he felt a force slam into his back, violently pushing him through the street and through another alleyway before finally smashing his body against the wall of a nearby construction site. "Don't you ignore me. I'm your opponent, not the boss. He'd kill you with a simple touch anyways." Midoriya shakily stood up, looking at the man who'd been sent to stop him with a frown across his face. He quickly retreated into the large, dark, and hollow building to get away from his foe. "He isn't going to let me go, and I can't just ignore him. I'll have to deal with this guy first before I can go after Eri and that other guy." He said his name was Overhaul. "If he is a villain, then I haven't heard of him before." Rappa chased after the boy, coming up hot on his tail and nearly catching him. Flipping around to face the unrelenting force, Midoriya fired off an air shot, causing Rappa to stagger before taking advantage of that moment to retreat to higher ground. Midoriya climbed up several floors using the windowless holes to do so before getting up to the 4th floor. With a serious look across his face, he hid behind a wall and listened carefully, prepared to adjust his position if need be and get the jump on his attacker. "Damn it, kid. Stop running and fight me," he heard him yell as he came running through the entrance farthest from him. Rappa looked around, seeing him nowhere to be found. He turned his back to continue searching, but saw a green and red hue out of the corner of his eye. "Street Louise smash!" Midoriya fiercely yelled as he dug his fist into the mon's side, causing Rappa to grunt in pain. The boy wasn't done yet as he reeled his other fist back and repeated the process of punching him over and over again. "This guy, he reminds me of Muscular. Not just an ordinary villain, but one who lives only to hurt and be hurt by others. I get this sense of danger coming off him. So I can't afford to hold back now." Rappa eventually overcame the pain he'd incurred from the hero's assault and managed to grab his arm before quickly returning the favor by mercilessly slamming his fist into his gut. "Ah, I knew you weren't weak. Let's keep going. It's my turn now," he excitedly shouted as he thrust his arms forward, letting out a fast and intense barrage. Midoriya's eyes widened in shock as intense pain hit him like a bullet train. He's barely managed to block the attacks, and it felt as if doing so changed nothing at all. Eventually Rappa sent one last powerful punch directly at the boy's chest, the force of which knocked him back several feet. The man was about to continue his assault until he suddenly fell to his knee as his body was shaken from the assault. "What the? I thought I'd staved off the damage of that kid's flurry of hits." Shakily rolling over on his back, Midoriya looked at his arms in horror. There were more bruises than actual skin visible, and he could swear that the very bones that made up his forearms were physically broken in several spots. "He did this to me with his bare fists. What is this guy made of?" The boy shook his head defiance as he stood up, fighting the pain that coursed through his every muscle. Rappa had done much the same and was still grinning. In fact, his twisted smile had actually grown even wider. "It's been some time since someone other than Overhaul has roughed me up this badly. I'm truly impressed. Now come on. We're just getting started," Rappa yelled in adrenaline-filled ecstasy as he charged forward. Midoriya charged in as well, with a desperate look on his face but not an ounce of hesitation. "I think his quirk contributes to his attack power, and if I am right, then my only chance of winning is here and now. I have to cripple him." The two combatants prepared their respective strikes and closed the distance, ready to reach out for victory at any cost. Rappa landed yet another strong punch to the boy's stomach as Midoriya plunged a stronger smash directly into the man's chest. His attack pushed the man back a few feet, but the one he'd taken in return had far more force as the boy was sent flying out the window. Panicked and driven by adrenaline from the agony he'd endured, the boy instinctively shot off another Air Force strike to propel himself upwards to try and land on the roof instead. This failed as he instead found himself falling again from a greater height. So the boy fired off another to alter his trajectory. This sent him closer to a nearby freight container. From there he shot one last one when close by in order to get himself to hit that instead, reducing the distance between impact to lessen the repercussions of his inevitable fall. Finally he landed on the ground with a loud thud but was barely conscious at this point. The boy desperately tried to get up, but his vision was fading in and out. In the distance he could see that Rappa had jumped down off of the building and was approaching him while holding his side. His movements seemed wobbly at this point. "I can't get up, no matter how hard I try. Am I going to die?" Rappa continued to close the distance while still holding his side. Eventually he was less than 10 feet away from the severely injured hero. "Oh no you don't, big guy." Just as he was about to pass out from the pain, the boy made out the image of a small silver figure charging in and striking at Rappa. The kids got back up. "Not good. I can barely walk as it is just from fighting him alone." Rappa desperately struck out in response, send one more fierce barrage of attacks at the newcomer. The steel-skinned boy blocked his barrage, but it did some damage, slightly cracking his skin in some spots. "Izuku, are you okay? Stay with me, come on." Laying on his back in agony, the boy shakily looked over to see he'd been cradled in the arms of a familiar person. Page. "Oh, NY. The blonde horn user looked at the boy in deep worry, a fear greatly visible in her eyes as she used her training to analyze the boy's state. 2 broken arms, several severe bruises, and bleeding from the head. Possibly some fractured ribs as well. I have to get him away from here, but I'll need to be careful about moving him." The girl looked back at her dear friend who was currently fighting with the perpetrator of such violence with a look of worry. Tetsu, hold him back for just a few more moments," she yelled out to her classmate. The boy smiled in delight as his hardened skin reformed. "This guy's pretty tough even after Midoriya over there did a number on him." "But sure you got it," he excitedly yelled as he continued to strike at Rappa. Pony picked the boy up and hopped on 2 of her horns, using them to quickly and smoothly transport herself closer to the road where she halted a car. The driver, looking to be in his late 20s, was behind the wheel and opened the door. His first instinct being to yell at a foolish young hooligan messing around, but he soon noticed the boy in her arms and he repressed that instinct. "I am really sorry to stop you like this, sir, but my friend needs help. We have to get him to a hospital and fast." The young man looked at the injured boy with an empathetic and sad expression before opening the back door. "Lay him down here. I'll get you guys there as quickly as I can." Pony quickly did as he said and placed Izuku in the back seat. "I know this is urgent, but I need you to wait a moment please. I have to grab my other friend," the blonde said, running off and returning to where Tetsu was. As the boy entered her line of sight, she saw that his hardened exterior was nearly broken and Rappa was visibly exhausted and beaten, clearly on his last leg but not out yet. The girl sent out one of her horns which latched onto the boy's clothing and pulled him back. "Hey, what the heck, Pony? I was about to lay him out," Tetsu shouted. "You're as winded as he is. I will not risk the lives of my friends on a whim," she said, not having any of his stubbornness. Making her way back to the car, she opened the passenger door and pushed Tetsu in there. "All right, drive. Get them out of here quickly," the horn user yelled. The young man looked at her with a concerned expression, wondering why she wasn't coming too. "What about you though? Don't you want to make sure your friends are safe?" he asked. Pony pulled her wallet out of her pocket and flashed her provisional hero license. "I am a student hero, so are they. If you see any pros, send them my way. Right now a villain is on the loose and no other heroes are nearby. I can't risk letting him hurt anybody else. I'll meet them at the hospital later. Now get moving," she commandingly yelled out in a serious tone. The driver gave a determined nod and turned his attention to the road before driving off as fast as he could. Pony turned to where Rappa was and proceeded to make one final trip back to face him. "I don't know that guy, but he looked like the sincere type, so I think I trust him enough to do as I asked. But right now I have to stall that monster until a pro arrives," the girl thought to herself. The horn user found herself back at the construction site. Rappa was on his hands and knees, coughing up more blood and shaking and heaving from the severe damage he'd taken from Midoriya and Tetsu. In spite of his injuries, the man looked completely furious as his rage-filled eyes fell upon the young girl. "You ruined my deathmatch, you bitch. I guess you'll have to do instead." Pony looked at the man with an utterly pissed expression as she felt herself shaking in rage. "You nearly killed my darling Izuku. I'll make sure you never see the light of day for that," she yelled in fury as she prepared to punish the man for his transgressions. Midoriya felt his vision and consciousness return, but felt a sharp pain run through his mind as he did. The light burned his eyes, causing him to close them and coil up on his side. What happened?" He quietly muttered to himself as he tried to recall what happened before he blacked out. Countless minutes went by until he finally decided to open his eyes again. The memories of his encounter with Rappa had fully returned along with meeting Overhaul and Eri. As his vision returned to him, the boy noted that he was in a rather quiet room. It was lightly colored and held little in the way of decor. He was in a bed with a dark green blanket covering his wounded form and could see that the curtains held the same color while the window was not too big but offered an adequate view of the city from above. "Young Midoriya, you're awake." Midoriya was surprised as Toshinori had frantically burst through the door with a look of deep concern but also relief upon seeing him. The former hero quickly raced over and hugged the boy, causing him some confusion. "All Might, what happened while I was out?" he asked. "I saved your ass. That's what happened." The green-haired boy turned to see Tetsu in a bed right next to his own, apparently only now noticing him. "And you have my undying gratitude for that, young Tetsu. I don't know what I would have done had I lost one of my precious students," the blonde man said in frustration, lamenting his own weakness after having lost his power. Midoriya looked down and saw that he was covered in bandages. Even his arms and head were wrapped, undoubtedly from the battle prior. After having fully put together what happened, he turned to his mentor with a look of worry. "All Might, I met a young girl named Eri. But I think she's in danger. There was a man who seemed to be her caretaker, but she was really scared of him. His name is Overhaul and we have to go and figure out more about what he's doing to her." The boy frantically shouted, explaining everything in short bursts of details. Toshinori looked confused for a moment but remained collected as he thought about everything he'd heard him say. "Did you just say Overhaul?" I've heard of him. He's a high-ranking member of the Yakuza," the man said with a thoughtful expression. Midoriya looked at the older man with a feeling of anxiety in his heart. "We're gonna have to gather more information on this situation you seem to have stumbled upon. I'll ask the other agencies and see if anyone has more knowledge on the Yakuza and their current operations," the blonde said, speaking with the utmost seriousness. The green-haired boy still looked uneasy, though hating the prospect of leaving Eri to suffer while he did nothing, but was caught off guard as his mentor rested a hand on his shoulder. "I know how you feel, and there's really nothing I can say to console you, so I ask that you think of it logically instead. We have no information, not on their hideout, their quirks, and not even on how much danger young Eri is in, if she's even in danger at all. If we go around acting impulsively, we might only worsen things instead of helping," he said with a somber expression. Midoriya looked down, balling his fist up in frustration. He knew he was right, and that's what hurt the most. "I know, All Might. I promise not to do anything stupid, but even so I won't rest until I know that she's safe," he said while looking up into the hero's eyes with a look of unflinching resolve and determination. Toshinori flinched at the sight as his eyes had gotten a bit watery and he stood up from where he was sitting. I know you won't. You really are just like me," he said while turning away and preparing to leave. Just as the older man reached the door, he looked back at the green-haired boy. "You should focus on getting yourself a work study. If we find enough evidence to take action, then you may be called upon to help out if you are acting as a hero's sidekick." Midoriya nodded in determination before watching the former hero leave the room. "A work study? Oh yes, I was going to ask Tagata about that, wasn't I?" As he came to the conclusion of what he was going to do, the green-haired boy eventually looked over at one of his saviors who'd been put in nearly the same condition as him. "Hey Tetsu, how did you and Pony find me in the nick of time anyways? It seems especially strange that of all the heroes it could have been, it was a couple of students from a different class that ended up being the ones to save me," he asked in a mix of curiosity and confusion. The gray-haired boy looked at him with a clueless expression. "I don't know really. Pony and I were just going out to get some stuff for our class, but she didn't seem all that focused on it. Eventually we heard a loud crash and went to investigate. That was when we found you almost dead and the villain who did it." As he heard him say that, the boy couldn't help but remember the times when he'd seen Pony in action. "Pony really is a determined hero. I can't believe how cool she is," he thought as he looked up, and a smile filled with admiration formed across his face. Elsewhere, Tsukauchi sat in an almost completely empty white room across from another, looking at a report he'd been given. And you certify that everything you have told me is an accurate account of the conflict that ensued earlier? He asked. Yes, sir, Pony enthusiastically said with a cheerful smile. The detective set the paper down and rubbed his eyes in exasperation. While at the end of the day you didn't technically breach hero conduct, you came pretty close. You realize that, don't you? The horn user tilted her head in confusion as she heard him say that. Kendo Rappa was inches away from death when we brought him in. His body is covered in cuts and lacerations from your quirk, while many of his bones were shattered and some of his organs have even been damaged. The black-haired man explained. Pony looked away for a second with a contemplative look as she thought about what happened with the villain. I suppose I went a little far. But still, the man is a violent lunatic. I don't regret doing what was necessary to save my friends and keep the innocents safe. Tsukauchi looked into the young student's eyes. They held a calm yet serious gleam. It was clear she felt justified in the course of action she took. Please take care to remember that heroes never kill if it can be avoided, and it usually can be. It tends to breed some rather messy emotions in both civilians and criminals. I don't think you'll find the possible repercussions to be very pleasant. The detective said. These words seemed to have an effect on the girl's thought process as she sighed in regret. I hadn't thought of it like that. I'll be more careful next time, she said, looking bummed out now. Tsukauchi smiled, seemingly pleased with the response. I really do understand what you're going through. When faced with atrocity, heroes often have to struggle between making the moral choice and succumbing to their internalized pain. It's one of the darker sides few ever really think about, but even so, what are we if we behave exactly the villains we oppose? He spoke as his eyes fell to the ground as if remembering a bleak moment from the past. Pony looked at the man in a combination of speechlessness and expectation, not knowing exactly how to respond. The detective eventually snapped out of his funk and looked back at the young heroine once again. As I said before, you hadn't technically broken the law. You exercised your authority as a provisional hero student and maintained peace and order. For those reasons there won't be any punishment. Should you continue to let your emotions get the better of you though and cause needless harm, you may be stripped of your license, or worse. The older detective explained while keeping his mask of cold professionalism to relay the severity of the matter. The horn user bowed her head in shame as she feared the prospect of failing as a hero. At this point Tsukauchi was prepared to leave and walked forward, only stopping a few feet away from the girl. This conversation is strictly under the table. Nobody except us knows what we have discussed. I only wanted to warn you to be more careful and not to act too violently. It would be a shame to lose such a promising young hero. The blonde remained silent as the situation seemed to weigh heavily on her mind. That being said, you should not dwell on this. Learn from your shortcomings now so that you don't end up doing something you'll regret out of anger. You're free to go now. Tsukauchi left these final words before exiting the room, leaving the saddened horn user by herself. Pony clasped her hands together and leaned against them, staring at the table as if looking right through it. After several minutes of reflection and deep thinking, the girl stood from her chair and left the room. I know Detective Tsukauchi was only looking out for me, and I was so angry, but I can't fail as a hero. Everything that I do is for my ideal future. I have a goal and I think of it every day. I won't stop until I turn my desires into reality. The blonde shook her head, reminding herself of why she continues to take the hero course, and looked forward with renewed resolve. Her thoughts then returned to a certain green-haired boy. She'd been worried ever since she last saw him beaten within an inch of his life. I heard Izuku made it to the hospital in one piece. Better go see how he's doing now. With her mind made up, the horn user raced out of the police station and headed to see her precious friend as quickly as she could. Back at the hospital, Midoriya was sitting in the bed resting as he thought about where he could find Mirio and talk to him about getting into Sir Night-Eye's agency. So how many of your classmates do you think will end up doing a work-study? The boy perked up in surprise and looked over at Tetsu with a confused look. I don't know. That's sort of up to them, I guess. I'm definitely going to get one though, he said with fierce confidence. The gray-haired boy looked to the side with a perplexed look upon his face. You're gonna rescue this girl you mentioned, aren't you? Even after nearly dying, you're not content to leave things like they are now. he said while looking back at the boy. Midoriya gave him a determined nod in response. Of course. That's what a hero would do after all. This answer seemed to catch the steel user off guard as he looked away with an amused chuckle. No wonder Class A is actually seen as better. Regardless of how good anyone's quirk is, they have crazy guys like this who never give up even on the verge of death. The two boys were suddenly startled by the door being slammed open. The apparent visitor standing there with a shocked expression across her face. Izuku, I'm so happy you're safe. And soon enough the green-haired boy weakly squealed in pain as Pony mercilessly lunged on him, hugging him so tight that she just might have threatened to finish what Rappa started. Pony. Too tight. He breathed out in pained gasps for air. Finally noticing what she was inadvertently doing, the horn user promptly released him from her hold. Oops, sorry about that, she sheepishly said while rubbing the back of her head. Before anything else could happen, Tetsu cleared his throat to gain their attention. I don't reckon you want to explain to her why you almost died in the first place? The gray-haired boy asked. This caused Midoriya to gasp in realization before turning to the horn user, who was nonchalantly laying on his bandaged body with a curious look. Well, there was this girl I met named Eri. And just like that, he once again explained the circumstances that led to the fight to yet another invaluable acquaintance. Sometime later he had fully managed to fill her in on everything. He had dragged it out so long that Tetsu fell asleep out of boredom and was just snoring away now. So, yeah. I plan on joining a hero agency for a work study. I am going to rescue her. He nervously said, not knowing how the blonde would react, seeing as she had been fairly vocal about her criticism of his self-destructive tendencies. Much to his surprise, though, tears seemed to fall down her face as she started gently sobbing. Gee, that poor girl. We gotta save her. Midoriya was relieved to see she sympathized with his feelings, but remembered exactly how dangerous just one of their mere henchmen was in the first place. I am really happy you feel that way, Pony, but I think I'd rest easier if you just stayed at UA where it's safer. This sentiment seemed to immediately send a spike of annoyance into the girl as she glared at him. You doubt my capabilities, after I saved your life and even defeated that villain. Fine then, I'll just have to further dispel this foolish notion of yours that I'm some damsel in distress that can't do anything. She responded with determination. Midoriya still looked worried, but saw that look in her eye, knowing that he would be wise not to challenge her pride and stubbornness if he knew what's good for him. Well, okay then. Just please don't put yourself in unnecessary danger. I don't want to lose a good friend like you. He meekly replied while looking to the side. Pony's jaw dropped in shock as she heard him say that. The tears that previously rolled down her cheeks paled in comparison to the waterworks that threatened to leak out at any moment. Oh, Izuku. The boy's eyes widened in unwelcome surprise again as she hugged him once more. Her affection clearly getting the best of her. Pony. Let go. He begged in agony. Unfortunately, she was too overwhelmed by emotion to even hear him as she continued to squeeze his soul out of him. The boy laid there in pain, desperately waiting for the suffering to end. It took a while, but much to the boy's relief she eventually let go, allowing him to catch his breath. After managing to collect himself, he looked back at the blonde who was just staring at him. By the way, how long do you, plan on laying on me? He nervously asked with a blush across his face. The horn user looked down and took note of the fact that she had not once moved from her position, just laying on top of him the whole time. Is it painful? She asked in a casual tone. Midoriya still couldn't stop blushing at this point. The only thing separating his upper body from her warmth was the thin, flimsy bandages in her near equally thin t-shirt that did nothing to hide her cleavage. Only when you hug me. Otherwise, no. He said rather nervously. Pony still held a blank and seemingly careless expression. His lack of ability to guess what she was thinking put the boy on edge as sweat dripped from his forehead in anticipation. Do you want me to get off of you? The boy nodded submissively, his face now burning hotter than Todoroki's fire. Are you absolutely sure about that? She asked with a brow raised, pushing her chests further against his own while wrapping her arms around his back. Well, I think so, but I'm really not sure. He quietly muttered out. Pony twisted her head to the left to look out the window before turning back to gaze at him yet again. In the following moments Midoriya felt a great sense of fear settle in the deepest depths of his heart as he saw the girl express something he'd never seen until now. A look of pure smugness. He felt himself shrink under her unmoving gaze, and a grin that, contrary to any smile she'd emitted before, held no innocence behind it. It seems as though night has fallen upon our lovely sky. It wouldn't be very safe for such a helpless girl like myself to return to UA all alone at this hour. Wouldn't you agree, my dear? She mischievously said while gazing right into his eyes with a predatory glare. The boy was left completely speechless, not even knowing how to respond. He had faced many villains before, but compared to this he was all too comfortable with doing so. And you're in no shape to return to UA either. No, you need your rest as well, don't ya? She further inquired as she carefully observed her target, looking to unveil every weakness she could and mercilessly exploit it to the fullest extent. Midoriya looked deeply troubled, but deep down he knew he had to stop this. But what if someone came in and saw us? He asked, trying his best to sound calm and talk the girl back to her senses. Pony looked up, adorning a thoughtful expression for a moment before eventually shrugging. Don't care. Given your relatively stabilized condition, I don't think it's very likely anyone would anyways. She said, apparently willing to risk it. At this point he was getting desperate. He knew he had to get the horn user to see reason somehow, and that's when his line of sight fell upon the sleeping steel user on the other side of the room. Okay. Well, what about Tetsu? Surely you don't want our classmates to get any ideas, right? He asked, quite certain that she'd have to see reason now. The horn user couldn't help but laugh at the question as she leaned up and pulled something out her pocket. It seemed to be some kind of stone. Here, watch. I think you'll really get a kick out of this, she said with an amused grin. Midoriya watched in shock as the blonde threw the stone right at the gray-haired boy's head. Even with his quirk inactive, it seemed to do nothing as he continued snoring away. The big oaf is one of the deepest sleepers you'll ever meet. Getting him up in time for class every morning is like pulling teeth with only your fingers. We all systematically take turns, and each and every one of us in Class B absolutely hates it. The boy sighed in defeat and leaned back, feeling despaired as it became clear that she could easily come up with an excuse or counterpoint for anything he could try and say to deter her. Pony grinned, knowing she won, and shot one of her horns at the light switch, turning it off and covering the room in darkness. The girl then leaned back down, snuggling up against the boy. Night, sweetie, she drowsily said before closing her eyes and drifting off to sleep. Midoriya rubbed his eyes in exasperation at her antics, which only caused him to wince again, reminding him that he was still in the process of healing. He eventually looked down at the girl and immediately felt mesmerized by the sight of her cuteness. The moonlight shined off of her as she quietly snored against his chest. Still awestruck and not entirely in his right mind, the boy smiled as he gently patted her on the head. Good night, he quietly said while closing his eyes and forgetting all of his worries, if only for a little while. After a long and painfully weird night, Midoriya was standing at the receptionist desk with Toshinori and Tetsu. A deep shade of red covered his face as he couldn't stop thinking about a certain blonde-haired girl. Just why? As he was lost in thought, Toshinori looked over and saw the one they were waiting on. Ah, there you are, young Tsunotori. Come on, we're about to check out, the older man yelled out while waving her over. Pony turned towards the direction of the voice and a joyful smile formed across her face as she ran over to them. Coming all might. It didn't take Pony long before she closed the distance and rejoined her party. With a happy smile, the former hero signed the two boys out of the hospital's care and the group proceeded to leave the building. Midoriya looked at Pony out of the corner of his eye. Being around her felt very embarrassing after last night. Somehow nobody walked in on her sleeping on me last night. On top of that, she had already checked in as a guest with permission to stay overnight, which is why All Might didn't bat an eye at her being with us despite not being a patient. The group soon managed to get down towards the parking garage and Toshinori grabbed his keys, pressing the button to make his car beep in order to pick it out from the dozens of vehicles that adorned the underground parking area. Ah, there she is, come on kids. He gestured as Tetsu was the first to follow. Midoriya still felt very nervous being around Pony as he couldn't fully cope with her affectionate ways. Contrary to him, Pony seemed completely calm and happy, like nothing even happened last night. Soon enough they all got to the car, where Toshinori naturally took the driver's seat and Tetsu called shotgun, leaving the boy stuck next to Pony in the back. He certainly didn't feel like talking about something so weird and embarrassing around others, so the boy simply rested against the window, staring absent-mindedly at the scenery for the entirety of the car ride back to UA. It took a short while, but the group eventually made it back to UA, with the car ride being rather uneventful for everyone. You kids go ahead and get back to class. Remember that if you feel your injuries starting to act up, you should seek permission to see Recovery Girl immediately. Toshinori politely yet also casually said to the students. "Aw, thanks so much, All Might. You're the coolest," Tetsu joyfully yelled before taking off. Pony and Midoriya looked at him with a sense of amusement and surprise. How can he still so much energy after that fight from yesterday? Pony thought to herself in astonishment. The horn user was roused from her thoughts by Midoriya taking a few steps forward but looking back at her. "I think I am gonna get going now. Don't want to fall behind in class," he said nervously before running off, similarly to her own classmate before him. Pony tilted her head in confusion as she watched him running away to pursue whatever might have been his next objective. "Okay, bye," she awkwardly waved, talking mostly to herself. The girl turned to All Might and sheepishly rubbed the back of her head as she smiled apologetically towards him. "I'm so sorry, All Might. Those two seem to have forgotten their manners. Please allow me to properly thank you for giving us a ride back from the hospital." As he watched the young heroine bow politely, speaking in a needlessly cordial manner, the man chuckled while raising his hands defensively. "Come now, young Tsunotori. It's hardly worth mentioning and definitely undeserving of praise. I only did what any of our teachers would have been happy to do for the sake of our students. You guys are the future and we're only here to guide and help you become your best selves," the former hero said, explaining that he only fulfilled his responsibilities. The older man's face turned to worry and concern in an instant as he saw the girl getting emotional. He was left in shock when she hugged him in the next moment. "But you still care enough to be there for us. Don't you realize how much that means?" Toshinori stood in shock as he heard this, completely dumbfounded as the girl started crying in his arms. "She's a rather emotional girl." Sweat dripped from the teacher's forehead as he remained unsure how to respond. It was flattering, of course, but still seemed so unnecessary to him. After some hesitation and uncertainty, he patted the girl on the head as he couldn't help but smile sadly after hearing her heartfelt words. I don't know what to say. Thank you." At this point he too was getting emotional and rubbed his eyes, having to make a conscious effort not to involuntarily emulate the girl's act of crying. Pony dried her tears as she eventually let go and ran off, waving back at him with her typical cheerful, loving, and carefree smile that she seemed to wear at nearly every point throughout any day. "I'll see you later, All Might. Again, I really appreciate you helping us out too." The former hero awkwardly waved as he watched the last student he'd made sure to escort to school leave for class. Later on, after much of the day had already passed, Midoriya was running through the halls, jerking his head left and right, frantically looking for Mirio. Where could he be? I gotta find him. Key. The boy was so lost in thought he ended up crashing into something. However, most of the pain he felt came from the lingering injuries from the previous day. Hey, are you alright? You really have to be more careful when you're running around like that." Midoriya felt a pair of arms wrap around him, catching him before he could fall to the ground as he felt the pain surging through his body again. The boy noticed that his head was pressed something soft as he heard a voice that seemed to dance on a thin line between familiar and foreign. He finally looked up to see the face of Nejire Hato looking down at him with a concerned look. Gradually gaining a clear sense of understanding of what just happened, he slowly looked down to see that he was pressed against her rather well-endowed chest. This fact only seemed to send his mind back into overdrive as he turned red yet again in complete and utter embarrassment, while he almost immediately went into a near catatonic state due to the unparalleled feeling of shock and embarrassment. Nejire's look of concern only turned to immense fear and worry as she saw the boy on the verge of passing out. "Oh no. You're really not okay. Hey, stop not being okay," the blue-haired girl frantically shouted in a panic as she started violently shaking the boy in an attempt to get him to come to his senses. "Oh, Plea. Ace. Saint Street. Op. Content to finally see any sort of semblance of a verbal response. Najire finally calmed down and released the boy, who in turn stumbled a little before regaining his balance and clutching his head as he blinked a few times, waiting for the stinging pain in his head to subside. Hey, you're one of those first years that challenged Mirio. Remember me? I was there too. Midoriya looked back at the older girl, and sure enough, he didn't have a hard time thinking back to the time when she interrogated the entire class on any random subject that caught her attention. I do. You were there helping to teach us about work studies. I'm actually glad to have run into you. Najire's gleeful smile widened, but at the same time she tilted her head in curiosity and uncertainty upon hearing this. You must know where Mirio is, right? Can you take me to him? I really have to talk to him about something. The older girl giggled while grabbing his hand, causing Midoriya feel a tinge of uncertainty. This might have been a mistake. I'll bet I can find him on my own. Before he could really decide, though, the boy was shaken from his thoughts by the energetic older girl seemingly dragging him along with her. I know exactly where he's at, let's go. Midoriya couldn't help but stare in silence at the girl's craziness, but hesitantly allowed her to continue pulling him through the halls. After what felt like an eternity of being dragged through the hallway and occasionally getting strange glances from some of the other students, a familiar head of blonde spiky hair came into view. Sure enough, Najire had kept her promise to bring him right to the older boy. Hey Mirio, this first-year boy has something he wants to say to you. Najire excitedly exclaimed while finally letting go of his hand. Midoriya looked at the boy nervously, but briefly remembered the reason behind his intentions and quickly composed himself. Hey Midoriya, what did you want to talk about? The older blonde had fully turned his attention to the green-haired boy and was patiently waiting to hear him out with a goofy smile across his face. I want you to introduce me to Sir Night-Eye, please. I really want to get into a work study with him, the boy said with the utmost seriousness. Mirio and Najire both stared at him in surprise upon hearing this. Silence filled the air as the green-haired boy anxiously awaited an answer. In the following moments, Mirio adopted an inquisitive expression as he stared intently at the younger boy, only further fueling his anxiety. Sure, why not? I was actually about to head over and see Sir right now. How about you tag along with me? Mirio casually suggested. Midoriya grinned in satisfaction and hastily nodded in agreement with the suggestion. I wanna go too. Mirio and Midoriya looked over at Najire, who had an anxious grin across her face. They both stared at her in confusion upon hearing this. I never really got to properly meet Sir Night-Eye before. I'm really curious about what the former sidekick of All Might is like. Not gonna lie, kinda curious about how your first impression is going to go to Izuku. The blue-haired girl cheerfully explained. The older blonde snickered upon hearing this and just casually shrugged at her proclamation. I don't see a problem with that. Let's get going, guys. Midoriya was shocked to see the older boy suddenly take off sprinting, waiting for nothing in the world and paying attention to nothing but the goal he'd set in mind. Wait for me, the boy suddenly shouted in desperate frustration as he followed Mirio's lead and ran after the boy. Najire giggled as she saw the two energetic young heroes dashing forward, already leaving her behind. Mirio's as pumped up as ever, however. The blue-haired girl looked over to the window with a coy smirk plastered across her face as she proceeded to open it and fly outside with the use of her quirk. I have a really fun shortcut for times like these. Sometime later, the three of them had arrived at the Night-Eye agency and Mirio led them up to Sir Night-Eye's office. You're both gonna love Sir. He's so funny. Just remember that you, if want to make a good first impression, then need to make him laugh. Mirio said with an unusual level seriousness. Why is he being so serious looking? Just what kind of guy Sir Night-Eye anyways? Midoriya thought to himself as anxiety and nervousness started to creep into his mind. As he continued to walk alongside Mirio throughout the halls, the thought of Eri popped into his mind yet again, and the boy's heart started beating even harder as fear and stress returned to him. You remember what you told us? Mirio suddenly spoke up, garnering Midoriya's attention as he looked over at the older blonde. He could see at Mirio's eyes a calm and controlled sense of composure accompanied by a gentle and caring light that seemed to put the boy at ease. Midoriya looked forward with a sense of newfound calmness. That's right. I came here for one reason. I'm going to make Sir Night-Eye accept me. This is all to save Eri. As he was caught up in his thoughts, he noticed that they were coming up towards a door. A not-so-faint sound of uncontrolled laughter could be heard from within. Oh my, sounds like someone's having loads of fun. Nejire casually commented as she joyfully floated through the air. Mirio stepped ahead to open the door and allowed the other two to walk in before him. All right, Sir Night-Eye's agency, let's see what kind of place this really is. It didn't take long to see where the source of the laughter was coming from. A blue-skinned girl was strapped to a strange machine and being tickled by two swaying feathers. See, this is how energetic you could be. Midoriya looked on in shock and astonishment while Mirio rubbed the back of his head as he awkwardly chuckled. Nejire's lips twisted into an ecstatic and childish smile. I wanna try, she enthusiastically shouted while floating through the room, unable to contain her excitement and amusement. Mirio stepped to the side of the room and looked at the blue-skinned girl with a sad smile. Poor bubble girl, looks like she failed to make Sir laugh. Midoriya looked over at the man who seemed fixated on the blue-skinned girl. This is it, gotta do this now. I'm not particularly good at making people laugh, so I've got only one shot at this. The boy ruffled his hair and lifted his head up. I am Izuku Midoriya. The room went silent apart from the laughter of Sir Night-Eye's victim at the hands of the strange machine as everyone was staring at him. Mirio looked deeply worried as his gaze flickered between Midoriya and Night-Eye. Nejire stared intently at the boy with a blank and hard-to-read look on her face. However, that near unreadable expression soon changed though. Ha ha, he looks like All Might. The girl chuckled as she stared at him. Night-Eye merely stared at the boy, his harsh gaze somehow growing colder. Midoriya stood still, holding his All Might impression now, not so much to make the man laugh but rather to mask the feeling of fear, anxiety, and embarrassment at how hard this stunt failed. What is this, boy? Are you ridiculing All Might? While Nejire continued chuckling and snickering, Mirio remained deeply worried as he watched Night-Eye approach the boy. Oh no, he's not funny. Night-Eye started to walk over to the boy, his cold gaze never faltering for even the slightest moment. You attempted this blasphemous excuse of an impression on All Might's former sidekick. The terrifyingly stone-cold man reached his hand forward, causing Midoriya's heart to start pounding even faster. All Might's wrinkles aren't like this at all, you fool. In his early days his crow's feet were 0.6 centimeters long, from the Silver Age they were 0.8. These days even unlicensed merchandise manages to have the correct wrinkles in the correct era. But you don't even know that much. Night-Eye berated him as he poked and prodded at his face, seemingly trying to fix it. Midoriya looked around and noticed that the entire room was filled with All Might merchandise. I don't care for this one bit, you can see yourself out. Night-Eye said dismissively. The Vinegar River incident, are you not aware of it, sir? As he was walking away, Night-Eye stopped in his tracks upon hearing this. A middle schooler whose quirk allowed him to change the properties of water was drowning in a river. But All Might stepped in and saved him. The drowning kid panicked and accidentally turned the river into vinegar, which obviously ended up getting in All Might's eyes. His face looked slightly different from normal. That smile, those narrowed eyes. That's the look I chose to impersonate earlier. Night-Eye turned around, his gaze fixed on Midoriya once again. I know this rescue, although it took place before I teamed up with him, and I believe they mentioned it on the widely spread television special entitled A Look Back. Yes, I love that show. I know there weren't any villains involved, so some people think it was a boring save. I am sure that's why the fans don't talk about it much, but I really like it for some reason. Midoriya excitedly recalled as he let his fanboy side start taking over. The older man walked back over, looking down at Midoriya as he adjusted his glasses. As I recall, the child's volatile home life was to blame. That's right, and that made All Might's actions and words carry even more weight, I'll bet. Mirio went over to Bubble Girl and released her from the strange torture machine. Mirio, who's that? He's loud. Bubble Girl feebly asked as the mercilessly tickling had ravaged her senses. That's the underclassman I was telling Sir about. Mirio watched on in pride as Midoriya rambled on about All Might like there was no tomorrow. He totally failed to make Sir laugh, like massively. But I gotta say I still think he's making a good first impression. The blonde thought to himself. Midoriya continued to excessively sing the endless praises of All Might for almost 10 minutes, completely lost in total excitement and admiration for the number one hero. That's enough. The green-haired boy looked over at Night Eye, who had taken a seat back down at his desk and seemed rather exasperated. It's quite clear that your admiration for All Might knows no bounds. However, if I recall correctly, you came here because you wanted to be hired on for a work study at my agency. Night Eye stated, no longer interested in anything other than getting down to business. The green-haired boy instantly knew that it was time to take things seriously again and went to stand in front of Night Eye awaiting his next words. Sir, I came here to do a work study with you in hopes that we'll run into two particular individuals. An older man and a little girl. I suspect that this man is abusing the little girl in some horrendous manner. Sir. Night Eye leaned forward, staring directly at the boy with a calm and focused expression. His eyes fixed solely on Midoriya. A rather unexpected reason. Tell me though, why not just inform the authorities and wait to hear of a resolution to this matter? Midoriya and Night Eye stared directly into one another's eyes, both trying to get a read on the other, one looking for a final response and the other looking to weed out every strength, weakness, belief, and motive. Because I think this man is too dangerous not to take matters into my own hands. He's not working alone. I had a fight with one of his subordinates the other day and am only alive now due to sheer luck, and if the boss is somehow even stronger. The former sidekick continued to stare into Midoriya's soul, listening to every word and seemingly looking for something that perhaps he himself wasn't even sure of. I believe he's a part of a larger group. One with a sinister motive and the means to make it happen. The man I just mentioned went by the name of Overhaul. Night Eye's eyes went wide in slight surprise as he processed what he just heard. For the first time since their meeting began, he tore his gaze from the boy. He's met Chisaki. Just how could this random boy have coincidentally encountered someone as calculating and cautious as him? Midoriya looked at the older man in confusion as he seemed to have lost his seemingly unflinching train of focus. Are you ALR? The boy hesitantly tried to express his concern, only to be silenced by Night Eye's cold glare once again. If you're intent on working at my agency, then we'd need to draw up a contract. Upon hearing this, Midoriya immediately reached for his bag, digging in search of the proper documentation. Of course. Yes, I brought one. You will not interrupt me while I'm speaking to you. Night Eye firmly reprimanded him. Sorry, sir. Midoriya blurted out in a haphazardly apologetic tone. The boy eventually pulled out the necessary paperwork and placed it on the desk in front of him. Once I stamp this document, you'll officially be contracted with my agency for a work study. Yes, sir. Night Eye pulled out his stamp as he looked back at Midoriya, who was bowing anxiously yet again. You have to understand that this will be nothing like the week-long internships that you students take on so casually. You must work here for a minimum of 4 months and will be paid wages. However, your academic responsibilities will likely suffer due to absences you'll rack up. Which means your classmates will pull ahead of you. Night Eye thoroughly explained in his clear and professional tone. I understand that, but if I worry about what everyone else is doing, I'll never be number one. Night Eye finally lifted his arm and seemed intent on signing off on the document. The boy anxiously watched as his arm almost seemed like it was moving in slow motion due to how tense he was feeling. I think you missed, the boy awkwardly said as he looked at the former sidekick. Night Eye's gaze fell back onto the boy as he began beating his stamp into the desk in a repetitive motion. Because I am not approving this. Midoriya was left speechless as he heard the man say this. He simply stared in shock and confusion. In a way, you may very well be of use to me, however. There is only one way a hero can be of any real use to anyone in this world. And that usefulness is determined by their ability to think, react, prioritize, and accomplish a multitude of tasks in order to carry out their responsibility to protect the innocent. You've yet to prove yourself to be of any real value. After having declared his stance on the matter, Night Eye rose from his desk, stamp in hand and a determined look in his eye. So, what are you saying? Midoriya asked in an offset and unsettled manner as he began sweating bullets the moment Night Eye got out of his seat. The man turned his gaze towards Mirio, Najire, and Bubble Girl. You three. Give us the room. Sir, yes sir. The three of them firmly said as they stood at attention. Once more with feeling. Sir. Yes, sir. They energetically yelled as they saluted him. The three wasted no time in leaving the room as he had ordered. Night Eye looked back at Midoriya as he walked towards the center of the room and adjusted his glasses in a composed manner. If you want to join my agency, then come and take this stamp from my hand. Sign that contract yourself, and show me if you've got what it takes to be All Might's successor. Midoriya stood before the next obstacle on his path to becoming a hero with a look of frustration upon his face. You have 3 minutes. I will take no offensive measures during this time and you are free to attack me however you'd like. Do not concern yourself with what happens to the room. Just come and get it. Sir Night Eye appeared to be quite determined as he looked down on the hero, intent on showing him what a failure he was. And just like that the time started as Midoriya activated his power with a look of resolve in his eyes. One for all full cowling. The boy charged forth reaching out to take the stamp he so desperately needed to pass. An approach from the front, but it's merely a feint and failed grab. And then another jump attack to no avail. I can see everything. Midoriya landed sliding his foot on the ground to gain his momentum back and pushed forward yet again. I knew it. Still maybe if I just keep trying moves. Far too unwilling to give up the boy lunged at Night Eye yet again trying over and over to grab the stamp only for the pro to continue effortlessly evading each hit. After failing he threw his bag at the man trying to distract him and lunged forth yet again. Is that all you got? The boy looked to the left where he saw Night Eye standing with an unimpressed look as he adjusted his glasses. I thought you were attempting to show me your usefulness. This is a complete waste of time. As time passed Midoriya did the only thing he could and continued to grasp and lunge at Night Eye's hand trying to obtain his stamp. 1 minute passes. He backs up briefly, and appears nervous, finally understanding that he can't overcome my foresight. Midoriya stood before the hero with a look of frustration as he scratched his head trying to think of a solution. It doesn't matter how many moves I try. He's 1 step ahead. There's gotta be a way to slip past his quirk. I had high expectations of you until now. The green-haired boy gasped as he heard this and looked at the man seemingly rather stunned. You have the power to become a symbol, but you're mediocre. Meanwhile villains everywhere are getting restless and gloom is creeping closer. A pity, All Might chose wrong after all. Mirio should have inherited the power. Midoriya looked rather shocked and offended as he heard the comment and couldn't stop looking at the hero in bewilderment. What do you mean chose wrong after all? Night Eye adjusted his glasses while lowering his guard in the face of his opponent. Don't get me wrong, I do love and respect All Might, but I don't understand why he chose you. The man said briefly explaining his perspective to the young hero. The boy shook his head in annoyance as he recalled the other day looking up at the former sidekick with a fist clenched in anger. I already told you why I'm here. What does that to do with anything? The boy yelled out charging at Night Eye full speed. He dashed towards his arm yet again only for the man to effortlessly dodge just as he had been causing him to land behind him. Midoriya caught himself using his hand and spun his body aiming his leg to try and sweep Night Eye. Everything was foreseen however as Night Eye jumped over the sweep attack and put some distance between them. He turned his gaze to the side only to see Midoriya already closed the distance and jumped off the wall lunging at the hero. You want to see what I can bring to the table as All Might's successor? Then I'll show you when I save Eri. Night Eye remained unimpressed but even with his foresight he was forced to move faster as the boy's newfound energy and determination to succeed offered a slight spike in difficulty as far as evasion went. While dodging the boy's endless barrage of grabs the man couldn't help but find himself a bit surprised by the look in Midoriya's eyes. Having forced Night Eye into a corner at last the green-haired boy charged forth with all his power, speed, and determination. I have faced many challenges since I inherited this power, you won't break my spirit. As he was shouting the boy was interrupted by himself face planting into the wall after Night Eye gracefully spun to the side with the same look of disinterest he held from the moment he laid eyes on the successor of his former master. Time's up, you failed. How can you ever hope to succeed when you're already tired out after a simple little test? The man asked, his tone laced with disappointment and resentment for the weakness of the current state of One for All. Midoriya shakily rose to his knee from the ground, looking down in shame and annoyance at his less than preferable results in this little performance he'd been challenged to. I didn't botch this test because I was tired. I had to adjust for my landing to avoid hitting the 10th anniversary poster of All Might. Night Eye gasped in surprise as he looked up at the poster. Sure enough, not a single mark from the boy's feet had landed on it. He turned his head to the left and to the right, surveying the condition of the room, only to be surprised once again by every bit of his All Might merchandise remaining untainted by the battle. Seriously, all while contending with my provocations and keeping constant motion throughout the test, he managed to avoid stepping on any of the All Might merchandise. Suddenly the door burst open where Mirio, Nejire, and Bubble Girl posed dramatically with needless enthusiasm. And QR well-timed return. That loud bang sounded pretty final. The decision was an obvious one. He knew full well what he wanted to do from the start. Everything in between was just to sat his curiosity after all. And so Night Eye turned to Mirio with a look of clarity. I'll take the boy, Mirio. Midoriya raised his head in surprise and confusion as he looked up at the hero. Really? But I didn't do any of the things you asked of me. Night Eye turned his head back towards the boy's direction with the same cold and scrutinizing gaze he was so used to by now. I said to take the stamp and sign it yourself. I never said you wouldn't be contracted if you had failed to do so. I had always planned on taking you in for a work study. Even as he said the one thing that Midoriya wanted to hear, his tone was cold and offered no sympathy or motivation. While you work here, you'll come to see Mirio as a far worthier candidate for One for All than you will ever be. Once again the boy lowered his head in frustration. In that moment he felt sickened. He couldn't even look the cold-hearted bastard in the eye. Although he accepted me as a work-study student, he hasn't accepted me as a successor to All Might. He's taking me on so he can make me give up, and honestly this makes for an unsettling dynamic. Midoriya rose to his feet, reflecting on the disturbing aspect of his newfound partnership but shaking his head to find his resolve. You can't make everyone accept you though. I joined for a reason, and that is not to prove a point to Night Eye. As Night Eye returned to his desk, the boy followed close, standing on the other side while he watched the cynical ex-sidekick stamp the document with a cruel frown across his face. He'd done it. Now he can help ensure that Eri will be saved, and in spite of this newfound but shaky and possibly even toxic relationship he had formed, Midoriya couldn't help but feel a tinge of satisfaction knowing now he'll be able to do more in the service of humanity. After what could technically be considered a successful completion of his task, Mirio had insisted on taking Midoriya and Nejire out to eat in celebration of getting a work study. The three sat outside on the patio of a well-known and much-loved burger joint that was almost always busy at all hours of the day, but this only matched the general vibe of their surroundings as the aforementioned burger joint was right in the middle of the busiest section of town. I seriously can't believe you actually talked him into it. Things really weren't looking good for a moment, but you absolutely nailed it in the end. Mirio happily and proudly cheered aloud as he chowed down on his meal. Midoriya sheepishly chuckled while rubbing the back of his head. He looked closer and tilted his head in bewilderment. He has an appetite on par with ponies. What's up with me having lunch with a bunch of gluttonous blondes anyways? The boy looked down at his own food and immediately felt a sense of embarrassment wash over him as his stomach growled. Guess with all the excitement, stress, and drama lately I haven't really had a good meal in a couple days. Without any further thought, the young hero grabbed his beef and veggie burger and took a bite out of it, which was tastier than he expected, and afterwards he proceeded to take a few more bites, blissfully savoring the taste yet becoming increasingly more addicted the more he ate it. By the way, Izuku, I have some exciting news to tell you. Midoriya was caught off guard by the statement and nearly choked on the food he was eating, but soon put his half-eaten burger down and turned towards Nejire with a curious look on his face. A few of your cute little first-year friends wanted to sign up with the agency I'm contracted at. The Ryaku agency. Isn't that exciting? I'm actually taking them to see her later today. The boy's eyes widened in surprise and excitement as he quickly stood from the table, giving the older girl his full attention. Really? That's wonderful. Who is it? How will you utilize their quirks? Oh, just have to know. Nejire couldn't help but giggle at the boy's curiosity, but offered him a teasing smirk as she wagged her finger at him. Not going to ruin the surprise. you'll just have to see for yourself when the time comes, but I can indeed promise you that it'll be worth the wait. Midoriya couldn't help but feel a bit of disappointment, but more so than that he remained excited by the mystery. Looking at the boy's burning curiosity and hopeful eyes, Mirio and Nejire chuckled as they looked at each other and exchanged a playful fist bump. That's so much better. I couldn't stand to see him so down in the dumps. Poor kid must really be beating himself up over what happened. Mirio thought to himself while looking at the younger student with a sad yet sympathetic smile. The sun eventually set and thus another busy day had concluded. Midoriya had long since returned to his dorm and was laying on his bed with a conflicted and heavily burdened look on his face. Pony has asked me to help with her studies tonight. I'm ashamed to admit that I am kinda glad really. I don't have the energy for it right now, but had she asked, I simply wouldn't have had the heart to say no either. His injuries had basically healed at this point, but his troubles hardly ended with the encounter with Rappa, and as much as he hated it, the boy had managed to come to terms with the fact that he couldn't quite help Eri just yet. And then there's Night Eye. Sure, his feelings towards the boy were demoralizing, but that wasn't really bothering him right now either. Midoriya turned over on his side with a fearful and uncomfortable expression. A certain someone's face was all he could think about after Mina's perverse teasing of him earlier upon his return home. Why is Pony so confusing? The boy clenched his skull with a deep blush across his face while he rolled from side to side on his bed in embarrassed conflict. The recollection of one of the most vivid nights he'd ever tried to sleep through played through his mind non-stop. Pony sleeping on top of him without a care in the world while he himself couldn't sleep a wink. It was all far too vivid in his mind. Her soft and supple skin, her sweet adorable snores that had to be the most wholesome thing ever, the faint scent of her perfume that was just subtle enough to drive him mad, and by far the worst of it all, her horns occasionally poking him just as he almost willed himself to sleep only to be poked at the worst time and place, bringing him back to the land of the living. Ugh. Even in that very moment he felt his sanity slipping as the boy shot up from his bed and looked at his wall alight with frustration. Losing his reason in that one moment, the boy violently charged at the wall, slamming his head against it so hard he fell back on his ass from the recoil. There was no blood or injury upon his forehead, just pain as he felt dizziness overwhelm high, and was left seeing stars. In his pain he could do nothing but lay his head against the ground. While his senses returned, so too did his frustrations. Ah, there you are, Midoriya. I've just been dying to know, who is that cute little blonde you've been hanging out with so much lately? Is she, by any chance, your girlfriend? Mina's sadistic and teasing grin along with her mischievous tone only served to annoy the boy as she brought forth the memories he thought he had repressed. And now, thanks to her, he couldn't get the horn user off of his mind. I don't even know if I can face her. People aren't supposed to act like that. I mean, sure, it's nice to be loved and valued, but this is just moving too fast for me to take in. Letting out a sigh of exhaustion, the boy got up off the ground, turned towards his door, now intent on leaving the room. Maybe a nice warm bath will help me relax and put my mind at ease. It certainly can't hurt to try anyways. As his eyes fell upon the hallway, not a soul was in sight, but he could still hear the TV downstairs signifying to the boy where some of the class must have been at the moment. Guess it's movie night. Not really in the mood though, he thought as he turned towards the bathroom and grabbed a towel out of the closet along the way. After entering the bathroom, Midoriya turned on the water and plugged the tub before locking the door with a glum and conflicted look on his face. While he waited for the tub to fill up, the boy grabbed the bottle of shampoo and poured some into water to get it nice and soapy. Steam slowly and gradually filled the room, causing the boy to subconsciously let out a sigh of relief as his shoulders slumped back and he started to undress. After a short wait, the tub eventually filled up, and with an anxious smile he turned the faucet off and dipped his toe in the water to test whether or not the temperature was bearable. Deducing that it was, Midoriya plunged his foot into the tub and hopped in, leaning back against the wall and letting his arms hang along the sides as he soaked in the blissful sensation of finally being able to take things easy for once. Ah, this is heaven, he thought to himself as he felt the warm soapy water envelope his senses and melt away the stress and fatigue. The boy opened his eyes and his relaxed smile turned into a disappointed scowl. So why am I still thinking about her? As much as he tried to force his mind off the matter at hand, even in the tub he couldn't stop thinking about what happened with Pony the night prior. Just how does she feel about me? Like truly feel about me? I swear sometimes she seems so self-contradictory. She said she doesn't have time for a relationship as she focused solely on becoming a hero. Yet she never fails to make free time to just play around. I just don't understand her at all. Midoriya was suddenly roused from his thoughts by his phone as he turned his gaze towards it. The boy quickly stood from the tub and dried his arms off before grabbing it and retreating back into the warm, comfortable water before the drastic change in body temperature could become a nuisance. He looked at his text and raised a brow in curiosity as he saw a text from Ochako. "Hey Izuku, could you come and meet Tsuyu and me tomorrow after class? We got something to talk to you about." The boy absent-mindedly replied before tossing his phone over by his pile of dirty clothes and leaned back in the tub, letting out an exasperated sigh. "I think I better just take it one step at a time. For now I'll worry about my new agency and then helping Eri, and after all that I can worry more about Pony." Now finally finding a sense of peace after coming up with a solid plan to deconstruct his troubles, Midoriya relaxed as he closed his eyes and rested his head against the rim. His thoughts now less chaotic and overwhelming compared to what they were not too long ago. The next day everyone had just finished class and Midoriya was just leaving the room. Out of the corner of his eye he saw Tsuyu approaching him. "Oh, that's right. Ochako and her wanted to tell me about something." Tsuyu seemed to have a fairly happy look on her face as she closed the distance between them while Midoriya looked at her questioningly. "Hey Midoriya, I don't know if Ochako texted you or not, but I was wondering if you'd come with me. We have some exciting news for you." Midoriya's eyes widened in curiosity as he couldn't help but wonder. He looked at his friend with a kind yet determined smile. "All right, lead the way then." After a while of following Tsuyu around, the two students had reached the lush and grassy outside area near the gym where he'd just barely started to make out the visage of two familiar faces. Ochako and Nejire turned to see Tsuyu approaching with the one they'd wanted to see all this time. "Deku, I'm so glad you came. I gotta tell you the good news," Ochako excitedly proclaimed while waving them over. After Midoriya and Tsuyu made their way over, the boy looked at her with his usual smile-filled kindness and curiosity. "What happened? I don't usually see you quite this excited, Uraraka," he asked in wonder. Ochako looked back at Nejire, who giggled as she gave her a supportive thumbs up, and then at Tsuyu, who was standing behind the boy, and nodded in affirmation and confidence. "We gotta work study. We're going to be out on the field saving lives and kicking butt." Midoriya was stunned by the news. It was perhaps the last thing he ever expected to hear in response, but a glimmer of light creeped into his eye as he felt his heart racing with happiness for his talented and amazing friends. "That's awesome, Uraraka. If I put two together correctly, you're interning with Hado at the Ryaku agency, correct?" the boy inquired. The two girls nodded in perfect unison, confirming his guess, which only further excited the boy. "Yes, it's us two, and one other," Tsuyu spoke up from the back. Midoriya turned around to look at the frog girl. He tilted his head in wonder at the unexpected addition of more unforeseen news. "Someone else? Who could it be? Do I know them?" The boy recited many questions in his head, only further pondering what he'd just been told about. "There you are, Izuku. We're going to be doing work studies together." The excitement and intrigue died down in an instant as anxiety gripped his heart and the sound of a voice all too familiar came into earshot, causing him to turn around in dread. Pony was running towards the group full speed with a giddy and excited look on her face and the energy of an unhinged bull that could see only red. Nejire, Ochako, and Tsuyu all cringed in disturbance and concern when they saw Pony tackle the boy to the ground. In spite of her affectionate nature, it looked rather painful as they heard the boy grunt in discomfort upon impact. Hey Pony. So, you're the other person studying under Ryaku?" Midoriya awkwardly and nervously asked. Pony looked up at the boy with an adoring grin, completely ignoring the position they were in. "Yes, Eri. Work-study student Pony Tsunotori, reporting for duty, and ready and raring to dispense justice to all evildoers." Midoriya chuckled at the remark as Pony climbed off of him and offered him a hand up, to which he nervously accepted. "I didn't know you two were so well acquainted. Wait, are you by chance the student in Class B that Midoriya's been helping to study. Suyu spoke up with a curious and inquisitive tone. Pony fixed her joyful and passionate gaze on the frog girl while playfully spinning around and latching onto the nervous boy's arm. Yes, actually, we've become like the best of friends since our time together. The blonde shamelessly responded while nuzzling against the boy's arm. Nejire giggled at the sight while Ochako seemed rather upset as she scowled at the two. Young love, is there anything more romantic? Nejire internally cooed out as she felt her heart being melted by the overwhelming and irresistible wholesomeness before her. Suyu watched idly as the horn user clung to the boy but didn't fail to notice his discomfort. I am not quite sure Midoriya feels the same way, but he's always been the socially awkward type, so maybe there's no need to jump to conclusions, yet. Ochako approached the two with a forced smile as she tried to hide the messy and complex feelings that never made any sense to her. I am happy to hear that, actually Deku. I didn't just call you here because I wanted to tell you about our work studies, there was another reason. Midoriya and Pony looked at the girl in confusion as she seemed to turn beet red and her usual confidence dissipated the moment she brought up the subject. Ochako nervously pushed her fingers together while meekly staring up into the boy's curious and innocent eyes. Do, why you, maybe, want to hang out. Just the two of us, sometime soon. The brunette quickly covered her mouth in shock, unable to believe that she'd just asked such a thing, but nonetheless she looked at the boy waiting for a response. Out of the corner of her eye she caught wind of something disturbing. Pony had her thumb and finger held up, scratching her chin with a confused and suspicious look on her face. Sure, I mean, I don't mind, we're friends after all, right? Midoriya awkwardly responded while averting his gaze and scratching his arm in nervousness. Ochako felt her face brighten up in a way she never thought possible as she felt herself shaking for reasons she didn't even understand. Sounds good. Gotta go. Bye. Midoriya, Pony, Nejire, and Suyu all blinked in confusion as they watched the gravity heroine frantically run off, making a less than subtle and elegant retreat from the conversation. The boy turned to the three remaining girls while nervously rubbing the back of his head. I better get going too. Tagata will surely be waiting for me at the Night Eye Agency right about now. Midoriya said as he ran off back towards school entrance, leaving his friends behind to focus on the next part of his day. An awkward silence filled the air as the three remaining girls stared in confusion at the sight of the empty area where Midoriya once stood. You girls wanna get some ice cream? Nejire suddenly burst out, breaking the silence. Suyu turned towards the older girl while Pony remained silent, staring at the direction that Ochako ran off towards. Sure, I'm down, the frog heroine casually responded. After another seemingly long while of awkward silence, the two turned their attention towards Pony, who was still staring off into space. Pony, Suyu spoke up in concern for the girl. Pony shook her head as Suyu's voice finally reached her. Oh, no, sorry girls, but I'll have to pass. Pony sheepishly replied while rubbing the back of her head with an apologetic smile. Nejire and Suyu looked at each other and then back at the blonde, seemingly unbothered by her answer. Alright, we'll see you later then, Pony. Let's go, Suyu, Nejire said while beginning to take her leave as well. Suyu followed the older girl, leaving Pony by herself. She continued to stare towards the direction where Ochako fled. The horn user's glare seemed all too lifeless and distant, and her posture all too stiff, with the only exception being her shaking fist clenched tightly at her side. Ochako paced through her room back and forth with an absolutely embarrassed look plastered across her face. Oh God, why did I say that? Why did I ask him to hang out with me? What's gotten into me lately? In the midst of her embarrassment, the girl accidentally triggered her quirk, causing herself to float in the air, but she barely even noticed in her frazzled state of mind, and as such her weightless body just continued to float around the room, occasionally bouncing back off the walls like a balloon. Seriously, why did I ask him to hang out all by ourselves? That's seriously not like me at all. And why did I get so upset when that Pony girl was clinging to him? The brunette asked herself. Ochako eventually noticed that she was floating in mid-air, but it didn't seem to surprise her too much, and the girl merely responded by pushing herself towards her bed and deactivated her quirk, allowing her plop down on it from the air and clasp her hands behind her head with a thoughtful expression on her face. Well, I guess we're hanging out now either way. But, if Mina were to hear about this. The Gravity heroine shuddered in terror at the thought of the pink-skinned drama vampire's possible reaction to her hanging out with the boy all by themselves, and made a dash for her phone, immediately pulling up her messages followed by Midoriya's contact info. If it's okay with you, I would like to keep more on the quiet side about this. Let's not tell anyone that we're gonna hang out, and I'd like to keep the place we're going to a secret as well. Is that all right? With an anxious and nervous frown, the girl sent the text, eagerly awaiting the boy's response, but knowing it might take him a while to get back to her, she simply tossed her phone to the side, hoping to reach the least degrading outcome in the end. I think I am just gonna get something to eat. Calm my nerves a little. There's no reason to get so worked up about this, right? The girl asked herself while getting up from the bed and making her way downstairs. Later on, Midoriya was walking alongside Mirio, both sporting their hero costumes, as he was looking around in astonishment. I know I've fought villains many times and all that, but I've never actually been on a patrol like this. Oh, it's so exciting. I feel like a real hero right now. The aspiring young hero internally squealed and had to resist bursting out in an odd manner due to such excitement. Oh, by the way, I gotta tell something you might want to hear. The green-haired boy was roused from his thoughts and turned his attention towards Miro, who was looking over at him. A few more members of the Hasaikai have been captured earlier today. It was a robbery gone wrong, but they sure didn't go down without one heck of a fight. Much of the central area was completely decimated and is gonna take a while to repair. The older boy explained. Midoriya soaked in the information he'd just been given and looked up at the sky for a minute. So that means they will have less manpower, right? Doesn't that make things easier for us? He asked in response. Mirio pondered the question for a brief moment before offering a clueless shrug. If one were to look at it from a surface-level view, then sure, maybe. However, this could actually make things worse if our enemies become more desperate. It could become harder to plan for or retaliate against them, and they may have a ton of nasty surprises that could spell our doom if we aren't cautious. The newly mentioned prospect seemed to frustrate and disturb the boy as he looked down with a conflicted expression. Help! That scoundrel just took off with my bag. The two boys' attention shot towards the sound of a distressed and angry call for a hero before Mirio immediately took off, surprising Midoriya with his speed. Come on, looks like this patrol won't be so quiet and peaceful after all. He yelled back to the boy. Not wanting to be left behind, Midoriya was quick to follow with a determined expression. As he turned the corner, he saw Mirio bolting ahead, and in the distance a sketchy-looking man running away with a backpack in hand. You gotta stop him. That punk took off with my bag. A middle-aged man clad in a dark gray business suit desperately shouted to Mirio. The blonde gave him a thumbs up and goofy smile before continuing to chase ahead. As the younger boy tried to keep up, he was shocked to see Mirio phase through a wall after seeing the thief make a sharp turn farther ahead. Damn it, Tagata's quirk makes fast-paced pursuits like this nothing more than a minor inconvenience. I won't be able to cover as much ground. Midoriya looked up in frustration and hopped from wall to wall to get on top of the rooftops. I am gonna have to try and get a view from above. The villain will have too many options for escape routes to keep track of. Jumping across the rooftops, he started to look for the thief and eventually ran into the ledge, where he narrowly stopped and looked down. What he saw next was less than expected, though. Mirio had already knocked out the thief and restrained him using a nearby bicycle rack. Fear not, my good man, the police will be here soon. I imagine they'll treat you well, the older blonde said with a goofy smile. Astounded by what he'd just saw, Midoriya hopped down off the roof using the window ledges as climbing points. Everyone had gathered around and seemed to be quite impressed by the spectacle. He's amazing. I can't believe this is the difference that experience can make in a hero's career. While not being able to resist admiring the older boy's skill, a troubling feeling started to well up in the boy as he looked down at his hand with a troubled expression. I still have a long way to go. As he walked down the alleyway carefully observing his surroundings with a look of disgust and paranoia, it finally came into sight. His destination. Overhaul looked behind him and gestured for his allies to stay back before he himself approached the downtrodden and abandoned warehouse. With a sigh of annoyance he reaching out and pulled open the large rust-infested metallic doors. The man cringed in disgust as he immediately picked up on the sight of dust. The building was naturally dimly lit with only a tinge of light seeping through the cracked and broken windows that one could barely see through if even at all. Back at the other side of the room he spotted his quarry and proceeded to walk in, closing the warehouse doors behind him. Cold, soulless, indifferent eyes met hate-filled and furious eyes filled with a sick and disgusting passion while everyone in the room tensed up at the sight of the crime lord. Why are you here? You ought to know what the conditions of the agreement we settled on are. So you have no reason to have come back. Overhaul stopped in the middle of the room, his glare never faltering for even a moment. Apologies, Shigaraki. I realize this is rather crass and unprofessional. But you're coming with me, one way or another. Shigaraki looked at the man who'd entered his run-down hideout with nothing but frustration and disdain. Compress and Spinner nervously traded glances between the two villains who'd failed to break eye contact for even a second since Overhaul arrived. Now just who do you think you are? Coming here and making such a demand? Shigaraki hopped down from his throne of discarded warehouse crates, a mix of gleeful amusement and unhinged rage festering inside him as he seemed about ready to let loose. Many of my subordinates have been captured by the heroes. Should they attack soon, I find my odds of escaping to be rather displeasing. The younger villain walked towards the man with an annoyed expression, stopping only a few feet away. And how is that my problem? I couldn't care less if you were busted by the heroes. One could almost see the amused yet sly grin through Overhaul's mask as he pulled out his phone and turned it on. I'm making it your problem, if you don't come back with me. I am going to kill her. Shigaraki looked closer at the video. A small dusty room with a hospital gurney in the center and an unconscious Himiko Toga hooked up to the machine. All right, that tears it. Overhaul jumped back as an enraged Shigaraki lunged at him and put the phone away before promptly getting into a defensive position. Shigaraki's hate-filled eyes followed the black-haired Mont's movement and soon he was already back on the hunt. Whoa, hold on boss, I think we should hear him out at the very least. Shigaraki violently jerked his back over his shoulder while shaking in anger. He tried to pull away from the crazy fool who would dare to try and touch somebody with a quirk like his. Let go of me, Dabi. I don't care. I am gonna kill him right now. The patchwork flame user had an amused grin as he pulled Shigaraki away from the other villain. Overhaul watched silently and thoughtlessly as Shigaraki tried to break out of Dabi's grip, but he was careful not to let him touch him. Surprising. Apparently you do have a level-headed and rational person in your little band of degenerates. Dabi and Overhaul waited a while for the bratty villain to tire himself out. A fruitful Chios as Shigaraki was eventually left heaving in anger as he exhaustedly looked at the source of his unhinged rage. You want to bring down hero society same as me. Help me and we'll create the world you've envisioned. One where the profession of hero doesn't exist anymore, where people like us have all the power. Shigaraki continued to send the man a hateful glare until he finally felt something that distracted him for only a moment. Burning pain gradually growing around his wrist as he looked down at his arm to see smoke coming from the point of contact where Dabi held him. The villain looked at his insubordinate comrade only to feel his anger die all at once. In its place a twisted mix of confusion, fear, and curiosity welled up inside of Shigaraki as he saw a look in Dabi's eyes that matched with every time he'd looked in the mirror throughout his upbringing. A shallow facade of calmness that masked a look of rage in his eyes. Dabi proceeded to yank Shigaraki away from the Crimelord and come in closer towards his ear. I don't know if you've realized it, but we're kinda in a bad situation right now, and I am not about to go down with you when I haven't even come close to achieving my goal. I'll kill you right now. If I have to. Not able to clearly make out what Dabi was whispering, Overhaul eyed the two suspiciously as he reached for his glove preparing to take it off. Perhaps I should just kill them all. This might have been a waste of time. The stunned Shigaraki stared at Dabi in astonishment for a few solid seconds before he turned away in annoyance, managing to pull away from his grip. The now seemingly calmer young villain took a minute to compose himself. Shigaraki looked down at the ground in shame and disgust, all aimed at himself before looking back at the other villain. Okay. Why you win. The villain finally managed to choke out those words as he felt himself cringe inside at what he'd just done. Oh hey Midoriya. A certain green-haired young man turned around to see one of his peers running over to him with an energetic and passionate energy to him. Oh hello Kirishima, did you get called out today for your work study as well? The red-haired boy stopped in front of his friend with a guilty grin across his face. Midoriya looked over his friend's shoulder to see someone running after him. Kirishima looked in the direction of the boy's curious gaze and smiled as he turned to face the newcomer. Can't believe you went and tried to ditch me like that, Kirishima. I mean, what the hell, man? Tetsu came to a screeching halt while looking a bit exhausted and more than a bit peeved. The red-haired boy couldn't help but chuckle as he playfully punched his friend in the arm, nearly forcing him to stumble to the ground. The gray-haired boy chuckled as he felt obligated to return the favor. Oh, is Tetsu working alongside you at the Fat Gum Agency? Midoriya asked, speaking up before they could really offer a two-way beating to each other. The two boys looked over at Midoriya and grinned in unison, forgetting about the playful feud they were about to get into. Oh hey Deku, are you heading out for your work study too? The green-haired boy turned to see Ochako, Tsuyu, and Pony walking towards them as if seemingly ready to go somewhere. Oh hey Ochako, yeah, I just got called in this morning. What about you guys? The boy asked in response as the 6 UA students all banded together in a little group. Yeah, we just got the message from Ryaku only minutes ago, the brunette said with her typical cheery smile. Midoriya looked at his phone to reaffirm to himself where the location was and then turned back to his friends. Well, since we're all going out to our work studies at the same time, do you guys want to walk to the station together? Nobody seemed opposed as Kirishima and Tetsu just casually shrugged to one another, and Tsuyu seemed to perk up at the idea of being with all her friends. Ochako was shaking in excitement, but Pony on the other hand. Oh Izuku, you know I'd take any excuse to spend more time with you. A now flustered and blushing Midoriya was caught off guard as the loving and cotton candy-hearted blonde leapt towards him and violently hugged the boy's arm with an excited look on her face. Ochako glared at the blonde, which seemed to go unnoticed by everyone except the recipient of said glare. Pony looked back at the brunette with a smug grin and stuck her tongue out mockingly, which only further annoyed the other girl. Well. TT, thank you. Pony. Let's get going then, I guess. Shakily and awkwardly Midoriya pulled away from the girl and slowly and stiffly proceeded to lead the way, followed by his doting friend as well as his other fellow heroes in training. Midoriya and his friends were all rather surprised. Not once did their paths diverge on the way to their respective work studies, and this only left them in the presence of their seniors. Mirio, Najire, and Tamaki all turned their attention to the younger students and seemed to have a concerning and uncharacteristic look of seriousness across their faces. We all ended up in the same place, and Mirio looks so stoic. Whatever is happening must be bad. Could it perhaps be related to Eri? Midoriya thought to himself in wonder. Tamaki opened the door and turned to his friends, giving a nod of affirmation. I guess it's time then. Come on in, guys. Mirio said, gesturing for everyone to follow him inside. Midoriya and his friends all followed the older blonde, and after reaching the end of the hallway entered a room that would only serve to leave them in shock and confusion. Many pro-heroes, both familiar and unfamiliar, all littered the room. It didn't take Midoriya long to spot Night Eye in the center of the fray. The opposite proved to be just as true, as Night Eye's gaze immediately fell upon the green-haired boy. With his trademark poker face, the former sidekick adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat to speak up. It would appear as though everyone has arrived. Let's all be seated and we'll begin right away. As he said that, all the heroes proceeded to sit down. Kirishima, Ochako, and the others had all joined their respective mentors, leaving Midoriya alone with Mirio, who he proceeded to take a seat next to. I suppose it would be most prudent to start with the reason you're all here right now. All eyes fell upon Night Eye, who sat at the head of the table accompanied by all of his respective associates within the agency. The reason I've called this meeting is simple. We've found enough evidence to pin the Chiya Hasakai as likely suspects in a drug ring that is experimenting with a new and very dangerous concoction. Night-Eye turned his attention to Fat Gum with an expectant look, seemingly passing the reins for the explanation. The other day our Sunniator here was shot with some kind of drug in the form of a bullet. It rendered him incapable of using his quirk. Nearly everyone gasped in response to this terrifying revelation as murmurs and whispers started to float around the room. That's just plain awful. Are you all right now, Amijiki? Midoriya asked in concern while turning his attention solely towards the shy older boy. Amijiki rubbed the side of his arm with a look of unease as he recalled what happened. Yes, I'm fine now. Whatever they used was only a temporary version. Here's a horse hoof to prove it. The manifestation hero said, putting Midoriya's concern to rest. Rock Lock shook his head in annoyance as he leaned back in his chair with a critical and judgmental scowl. We shouldn't be wasting time getting hung up on the little things. If these worthless goons really are manufacturing such a drug, then does anyone here have any ideas on how and why? Everyone looked around but few seemed informed on the matter. Naturally, over time their eyes returned to the man investigating this matter in the first place. All too ready to progress with the debriefing, Night-Eye pressed a button on his remote, changing the picture on the projector behind him. Midoriya looked away in shame and distress as his guilt hit him in the gut full force. Their young head Kai Chisaki has been suspiciously active as of lately, making moves and adding members into his ranks. Most concerning of all, though, is that he recently made contact with Jin Bubegawara from the League of Villains. All of the UA students in the room visibly and noticeably cringed at the mention of this, while some of the heroes who'd spent more time following the League's activated grimaced. Wait, so you're telling us that the League is involved in this too? Hiroshima shouted aloud in shock while blasting out of his seat and slamming his fists on the table. Night-Eye didn't immediately respond but instead gestured to his right and turned everyone's attention to his own subordinate, Juzo Moashi, the centipede hero. Pony looked at the man with a proud smile across her face. It really is nice to see more fellow mutant-type quirk users in the field of heroics. The projector once again turned towards another image showing the destruction of a warehouse. I was the one who initially came across Chisaki and Bubegawara. Although I tried my best to tail them, they were cautious to avoid bringing back unnecessary attention, and thus I couldn't pursue further. Wait, so how exactly is the League involved in all of this? Midoriya abruptly spoke up. Rock Lock glared at one of the young heroes he'd found to be quite unnecessary to have tagged along. Should these inexperienced kids really be here? I don't care if they are from UA. How are we going to get anywhere if we have to keep stopping and explaining everything them? Midoriya averted his eyes in shame at the harsh words, while Pony's attention turned towards the blunt and skeptical pro. Why don't you start by shutting your mouth? Your pointless critiques of the younger generation are also a needless consumption of time. He's asking vital questions that could offer valuable insight regarding what we're up against. The pro hero's glare turned towards the blonde and he seemed to grow more frustrated with her remarks. Pony, however, wasn't the least bit intimidated as she returned his hostile glare full force. After a few long tense seconds, both servants of justice crossed their arms, turning their heads in defiance and annoyance caused by one another. An awkward silence filled the air as the tension had grown so thick you could cut it with a knife. Everyone just stared at the two in anticipation. If we're done here, then I wish to continue. Now, in response to young Midoriya's question, no, we don't think they are working together. We've found sufficient evidence to suspect that their first meeting ended in violence and bloodshed. Once again Moashi spoke up, continuing where he left off. With everyone's attention regained, he pointed to the picture of the damaged building. With the fall of All for One, many believe that there is a power struggle brewing in the underworld, and this seems to be likely evidence that validates the theory. Midoriya thought back to the time when it all changed and some disturbing memories resurged in the process. The boy looked intently at the picture. Shigaraki, could he really be involved in this? With a serious look in his eyes, the boy turned his attention towards Night-Eye once again, now feeling even more pressured by the facts than he'd ever been. Now let's move on to the more pressing concerns here, Night-Eye announced while turning the picture onto the next topic. As if things could get any more disheartening, the boy immediately felt sickened and disturbed upon seeing the image of a very familiar girl who he'd remembered all too well. Fat Gum was the next to take a stand. With a determined look in his eye, he gestured towards Kirishima, who had a clueless look on his face. Thanks to Kirishima here we were able to acquire an undamaged sample of the bullet they were using. With his quirk the bullet just bounced right off his skin. Everyone seemed impressed as they all looked at and praised the red-haired boy. Good job Kirishima, I'd expect nothing less from you. Ochako shouted with pride. Oh, yes, your quirk was hardening wasn't it? I bet that's super handy. Najire added with a playful grin. Kirishima scratched his head in confusion while faking a smile. I don't really know what I did though. There was one thing we found though that sickened me to my core. Fat Gum announced with a disturbed frown. The hero looked back at the picture of Eri as his expression turned to one of anger and frustration. We found human blood and cells within the bullets. Midoriya gasped as he looked between Fat Gum and the picture and he desperately hoped that the idea he had was wrong. Human blood. The boy covered his mouth and looked away convulsing as he felt disgusted at the thought. For those unaware, Chisaki has a daughter named Eri. The girl has a very powerful quirk that enables her to rewind things, even to the point of non-existence. It would line up with the effects of this new bullet. As the heroes all tried to absorb the information, the room went silent yet again as everyone seemed rather disturbed by the thought. Sometime prior to joining my agency, Midoriya here had encountered Chisaki and the girl along with another agent of the Shihasakai. A fight ensued and as a result Midoriya nearly lost his life. Midoriya looked down in shame as Night Eye recounted the events that occurred not too long ago, offering a depressing perspective. Midoriya was willing to bear the risk of taking her right then and there. Moreover, it seemed as though Eri was covered in bandages. As Night Eye continued to speak, Midoriya's shame only increased further, leaving him shaking in frustration. Hey, would have been a lot easier if this amateur here managed to get the girl away from them in the first place. Pony once again glared at Rock Lock in rage at his belligerent remarks towards one of her dearest companions. As a hero in training, Midoriya did everything that he could. The simple truth is that he was outmatched and outnumbered. Even a pro would have had remarkable trouble in that kind of situation. The boy should shoulder no blame for that. Night Eye declared in disagreement, though as always he retained his unwelcoming presence. Rock Lock crossed his arms in defiant pride while turning away from Midoriya, seemingly dropping it for the moment. Another issue, if I may. How are the Hasaikai producing and distributing this product? Even if they are using the girl, that alone wouldn't be enough to get it out onto the streets and into the hands of other questionable individuals. Everyone looked back expectantly as Night Eye grew silent. The man pushed a button on the remote to project the next image, showing a map to everyone. His cold gaze shifted towards Fat Gum and he gave an affirmative nod, which was all the pro needed to understand. The large hero stood up once again, garnering everyone's attention, and took the floor. When I was just starting out, I helped the police bring down drug ops, and Kirishima proved yesterday that he could too. The man who shot Tamaki also used a drug called Trigger to enhance the effects of his quirk temporarily. Fat Gum pulled out 2 bags, one containing the syringe that once held the enhancement drug and the other containing the intact bullet. The distribution channels for stuff like that are complex. Drugs pass through various people and organizations before they finally reach the end user. There's no concrete evidence that Hasakai handled the drug, but we know for a fact they interacted with one of the middle men responsible for moving it. Rock Lock leaned up from his chair and rested his hands on the desk with an exasperated sigh. There's still another issue though. That girl managed to get away from their hideout, if only for a little while. And then she went and got herself seen by a hero. Do you really think he's just gonna leave her in the same place? Hell, I know I sure wouldn't. We need to be sure of where they're keeping her, or else we lose any chance of taking them by surprise. The critical hero said, bringing to light a new possible obstacle. He has a point. Have you thought of what our next move should be, Night Eye? Ryaku asked while looking back at the former sidekick. Night Eye let out a low, barely audible groan of annoyance. Though he hid it well, one could probably tell he was vexed by the prospect. That's our conundrum. Since we don't currently know how far along their plan is, the success of our initial strike is crucial. To that end, we've made a thorough list of groups with a connection to Hasaikai, as well as properties owned by the organization. This is our starting point. I would like you all to investigate each coordinate on this map. Everyone looked at the map, studying it intently. No one knew quite what to make of it for a short while. I see. So that's why asked minor heroes like us to join. A masked hero looked at his fellow nameless generic teammate with a confused look. What do you mean? Go on, look. Every one of the heroes in this room works in one of those locations. We know those areas better than most. It all suddenly became clearer as Midoriya looked on in amazement at the true depth of Night Eye's brilliance. Didn't expect someone who worked with All Might for so long to be such a careful planner. Let's just go take him down. While we're sitting here yapping, some poor girl is out there suffering right now. While Fat Gum seethed in fury at the idea of an innocent young girl suffering, Night Eye maintained his calm demeanor. We can't do this like All Might would. That is why we have to play it smart. Gather as much intel on the situation as we can and strike only when we have the highest chance of success. He's right. Just like how Stain's capture drew people closer to the League, we could face disastrous ramifications if we act recklessly. Ryaku added. Fat Gum looked around in frustration while Night Eye retained his cold composure and all the heroes went silent. At this point Aizawa raised his hand and spoke up. Excuse me, I've got a question. Night Eye looked over at the hero and nodded, giving him his full attention. I don't know the specifics of your quirk, Night Eye. Feel free to correct, but from what I've heard of it, your quirk Foresight allows you to see into the future. So why not use it on us? That's logical, right? Night Eye looked down with a troubled expression as his already cold demeanor became a little more distant. I am sorry, but I cannot. My foresight has some limitations. I need a full 24 hours between activations. That means I get one person and then I'm spent for the rest of the day. Additionally, the future is played in my mind like a flashback. Think of it like viewing a film strip. For 1 hour, I have the power to watch a person's life as a movie. The issue is, everything I see is from a tight perspective on the person in question. This severely limits my capacity to interpret context. Aizawa looked at the man in indifference, seemingly unconvinced by what he'd heard so far. That should still provide more than enough information to be useful, don't you think? And it doesn't explain why you can't do it. The former sidekick adjusted his glasses with a stern grimace across his face. What if I saw imminent death in your future? Worse, what if it were a cruel, merciless demise? Pony narrowed her glare in wonder and anticipation. As she stared on in an inquisitive manner, Izuku gasped in slight shock as he recalled something of the past. My quirk should be employed only after we've confirmed the highest likelihood of success. Then it can help ensure our victory. It shouldn't be relied upon when there are still too many uncertainties. Rock Lock was the next to give Night Eye an unapproving glare. Whoa, hold up. Death is still information. If we know what's coming, we can figure out how to survive. The man said, putting his thoughts on the table once more. You don't understand. It's possible what I see is unavailable. Bro, that's the only excuse you have for real. Oh hell no. Just use it on me now. I'll show you I can beat death. Night Eye looked down, now seemingly more troubled than he'd been this entire time, as his composure finally cracked. I can't. With those final words, the entire room went silent as an oppressively dark atmosphere enveloped the heroes. Mirio looked at his beloved and respected mentor in concern. Eventually it was Ryaku who was next to speak, letting out a low sigh as she did. We should get started. There's a child in danger. That's what's important here. As if desperately seeking a distraction, Night Eye immediately straightened his posture and looked up at all the heroes he'd gathered. We must confirm the girl's location and take her into our protection as soon as possible using the most accurate data. I'm counting on your help. All of you. Midoriya looked down in frustration yet again. It was relieving to know they'd soon be taking action, yet his mind once again turned towards his previous failure. Eri, I'm so sorry. I promise, I won't fail you ever again. I'm going to save you. It took some time, but the heroes dispersed from the room in order to return to their respective jurisdictions and carry out their portions of the investigation. No time would be wasted and no stone unturned. Elsewhere at the Shia Hasakai's underground headquarters, Shigaraki laid in his bed in the temporary room that had been set up for him. A resentful scowl grazed his wicked face as he looked up at the ceiling. Many thoughts came to mind, but one was more prevalent than anything else that had occurred as of lately. Dabi, what do you hate in this world so much that you'd burn anything you deemed necessary to destroy it? To be continue. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.